Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:01 p.m. And the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convened in a workshop on Monday, July 28, 2025. A quorum of board members is present. Please note for the record that we will not have Mr. Norwood with us this evening or Mr. Preston. This meeting has been duly called. The notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. Second item on the agenda is public comments. Becca, I believe we have two. First one will be Greg McDaniel. Mr. Daniel, if you would take a seat there, and let me read this into the record real quick, okay?
Okay, sir.
All right. In accordance with District Policy BED Local, any person wishing to address the Board of Trustees during public comments shall sign up before the meeting. In order to comply with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the board may not respond to comments or otherwise discuss or act upon any issues that are not posted on the meeting agenda. Participants will be allowed 3 minutes for public comments regarding items on the agenda. We have a timer on the screen that shows your allotted time, and a sound will occur at the conclusion. The board shall not tolerate disruption of the meeting by members of the public. Okay, Mr. Daniel, if you'll proceed.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to talk about long-term return on investment.
Mr. Daniel, excuse me, we do have your handout.
Awesome.
Everyone has one.
Yes, also. Yeah, I'll refer to the second page here in just a second. I just want to ask, will taxpayers see long-term financial benefits to the extent that we break the bond cycle? Let's take a look back and see what we can learn from the past so we can make better decisions going forward. This is the front page of the Belton Journal, and y'all, I think, have a copy of this, from March 8th, 1962. The top headline reads, "Voters decide $500,000 bond issue." We know now this $500,000 bond for Miller Heights Elementary passed in 1962. And then the school sold that property for $750,000 in 2025. Miller Heights Elementary sold 62 years after it was built for a fraction more than its original bond. To me, that's a sad day for taxpayers, in my opinion. A quote from this front page article in 1962. Residents of Belton Independent School District will vote on a $500,000 bond issue to provide for a long-range construction program to give Belton an adequate school system. Had I been alive in 1962 and read that, I would have voted yes to this bond. And I would have voted yes thinking I'll save future generations from the expense of building new facilities on down the road. We know now that that's not really how it worked. It's remarkable how many bonds pass each decade to update our schools and to build more new ones. The 1962 bond was far from the last bond. But the thing is, any bond can be the last bond, and here's why. Real estate goes up in value, that's a fact. Even in Houston's 5th Ward, the red light district in San Francisco, even Harlem, and yes, even in South Belton across from apartments with a little bit of a sketchy reputation. Real estate always goes up. Real estate especially goes up when it's been updated, improved, and maintained. Think about the bonds passed over the last 62 years to update and improve Miller Heights Elementary. It's no surprise the market value of Miller Heights, according to Belcat and Zillow, was $2,355,659 at the time of the sale in 2025, when BISD accepted only a fraction of its worth as payment. No one protected taxpayers' investment or the gift of the land from Mayor Griggs and Dr. Sewell. Where will we be 60 years from now? Let's work together to break the cycle of bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. All right, next we have Mr. Jeff Howard.
Evening. How y'all doing this evening?
Yes, thank you.
My ducks in a row.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Okay. Just to be clear, people that know me here, I am not anti-bond. Okay, we went through this about 3 years ago. But bonds are necessary for schools to build and expand. Everybody understands that. After attending the public bond presentation, I appreciated the opportunity to hear about the bond and ask some really serious questions and got some good answers. It also raised several questions I hope the board will ask yourselves these same questions as you're doing these workshops. Bonds should be used for absolute needs, not wants. These are taxpayer dollars. And the board has the ultimate responsibility for taxpayer funds. Currently, BISD holds $585 million in bond debt. That's 35 million more than KISD has, with three times the student population. It breaks down to a little over $45,000 per student in Belton versus $14,500 in Killeen ISD. The vast majority of these bonds, as I look through it, is a request for maintenance. Well, we're already paying for maintenance in our maintenance and operations tax dollars from our property taxes, so it seems we're getting double taxation for not properly investing in maintenance dollars and spending more money in operations dollars. The proposed bond has 4 propositions, and actually only 2 propositions. Proposition 1, to add $218 million for a total of $803 million in bond debt, or Proposition 2, $189 billion for a total of $774 million in bond debt. Most of the bond appears to deal with maintenance, ongoing process, and needs to be continually funded. It seems that maintenance funding has kind of taken a backseat to operational funding. No one here would mortgage their house to replace a roof or replace their air conditioning. And that's essentially what we're doing with a lot of this maintenance money. The natatorium, 100%. If the community can use it, it benefits community, that's a yes on that one. I have a few questions and concerns that I have and many others have asked me to address here tonight. HVAC and roofing. There was $11.4 million in the ESSER 1, 2, and 3 money. Some of that money could have been used for HVAC and roof repairs. It was specifically designated in ESSER funds for that. How much of that was used? What is the current operations to maintenance funding ratio? Is it 80-20, 90-10? It used to be 80-20. Asphalt repairs, $7 million. That's another maintenance item that should have been an ongoing item. You don't wait to repair asphalt. It gets done as it's needed. $41 million for stadiums. Does Tiger Stadium really need modernization and maintenance? Yeah, I'm sure it does. But is it now time to upgrade Lake Belton High School also? Can we get by with just track and turf replacement and some minor maintenance? KISD has 5 high schools. They have 2 stadiums. Belton can get by with what they got until they expand even farther. Tech infrastructure. What's the definition of that? Okay. Do you mind if I extend a little bit of time?
Well,
I have about 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Funding for laptops and Chromebooks. The big question I was getting was, are parents required to put a deposit on them? And who's accountable for loss and damage? Is it the taxpayer or the parent? I have another proposition, Proposition E. An a la carte of the 4 propositions that are immediate needs to bring maintenance up to par and then plan to increase maintenance funding. An option that takes current economics and taxpayer views into account, an option that does not put BISD $750 million in bond debt, and an option that allows the board to show that they're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
That ends our public comments for the evening. Moving down to item 3. Board workshop regarding potential bond projects. Dr. Dillon?
Yes, thank you so much for being here this evening, Board, and for your engagement in a really important question and conversation for our community and for our students and for our staff. So I just am going to thank you up front for what I know is going to be a really thoughtful conversation this evening. So as you know, the Board of Trustees approved a bond advisory committee charter, and I'm going to go into that charter just as a reminder in a second. But I wanted to be really clear, tonight is not about taking action. Tonight is about a conversation. A bond has not been called. There's no action on tonight's board agenda. This really is for a conversation. We've been gathering input and feedback from various stakeholder groups and are here this evening to share that information with you and hear your thoughts and feedback this evening. So just as a reminder, the Bond Advisory Committee was commissioned to come together to help prioritize needs around safety and security, programmatic needs, replacement cycles that we believe are impacting our students and our staff. And so we were bringing that information to them for consideration and feedback. Their role was really to look at the long-range facility plans that have now been developed, as well as look at the financial implications of any potential plans that we were bringing forward, give input into some of those plans. And so the bottom, you just see big picture. The meetings that have lasted over the last 2 months were really around orienting to the data, really identifying needs and gathering input on that, those needs, as well as reaching consensus, and then just recommendations for what we would then take forward to a community meeting that we held, and then ultimately an online survey that we put out, all of which informed a conversation we're having this evening. So Mike's going to walk through some of the long-range planning that has been taken place over the last several years, as well as the investments that you and previous boards have put into our facilities in terms of maintenance and repair of facility, as well as our community's contribution and commitment to past bonds that have been passed.
Yeah, and so we really wanted to try to create a visual that told a pretty broad story, and we could get a lot of information and kind of see how what's going on in several elements, from a bond standpoint, a planning standpoint, investments that we were making from our M&O budget into capital projects, and then kind of looking at the tax rate, which coincides with each of those years. So I'm going to start kind of at the top. You can see that with our 2017 bond that was passed, the addition of Lake Belton High School and Charter Oak Elementary, which were new schools that came online as a result of that bond, along with a couple of smaller minor renovation projects as well. You can also see on the top line repurposing what had been the Belton High School 9th grade center when Lake Belton High opened back into a middle school BMS, and also in 2022 the repurposing of New Tech, which was a part of Belton High School, to become its own campus at that time as well. The transition for both of those projects you'll see reflected in the gray bar just above the year, the timeline that is indicates the investment from our M&O or from our fund balance into capital projects, and I'll get into the breakdown of those a little bit more in a second. And so then you can see in the middle section there the 4 items or 5 items in white, and that is some of the planning that has gone on over the past 4.5 years to be able to assess our needs and be able to have a long-range plan and know. And so you can see it kind of started in 2021 with the facility assessment. But one of the really important things about the facility assessment is that it helps us to effectively plan for capital needs. It breaks things down to on a facility by facility level, down to the air conditioning unit, down to the hot water heater, down to every piece of equipment as to what year it was manufactured, what year it was purchased, its serial number, and then the expected duration for the life of that piece of equipment, and when that piece of equipment will likely have to be replaced. And we had the same thing, the same process with our roofs, the same process done with each facility and each campus in the district. What kind of coincided with that as well is after our 22 bond, we created a long-range facility planning team that was made up of stakeholders, and over the course of about 2.5 or 3 years, we met with them 5 times per year, and we talked through needs that had been met in the 22 bond, needs that were being met through our M&O investment in capital projects, and then what our future needs might be. And so that's where we came to the board last summer, and as we have been working through that facility master plan, bringing a group of stakeholders together to talk about some of the prioritized needs and how we may want to try to address those needs in the future. As you can see there with the darker gray boxes, that starts with, we started back to about to 2020 just to tell the most recent story, but in 2020 we invested about $6 million, right at $6 million in capital improvements from our M&O budget, and that was a combination of a project list that we put together in the 2019-2020 school year that impacted a lot of the campuses that were not impacted by the 2017 bond. And it also included the investment that our purchasing department made in furniture and equipment, the money that our athletic department spent on athletic improvements to athletic facilities, and it also includes the money that our facilities department spends out of its annual budget. And our facilities department, led by Rodney Marek, we've averaged $1.1 million over the last 6 years, and then you can see the other amounts that have gone in. Another thing the story kind of tells is a significant investment from our M&O in the 19, 20, and 21 into the $3.5 million in capital projects. As that kind of wrapped up, you can see in 2022 a heavy investment in new tech and in our natatorium. We spent over $360,000 on a replacement of the pool liner in the natatorium, as well as close to $2 million in facility improvements in furniture and new tech as we transitioned. And then you can also see that in 23, 24, 25, we have not been able to sustain that same degree of investment out of our M&O budget. And so that kind of tells the story from the top part. You can see on the bottom, that's just our tax rate, our adopted tax rate each year. Obviously the gray, to tie it back into the top, that is the M&O tax rate, the maintenance and operations tax rate. That is the tax basis that pays for all district expenses other than debt service. And then you can see the red tax rate at the top is our INS, our interest and sinking tax rate, which pays for our debt service each year. You have more local control over your INS rate, and thankfully the M&O rate has been compressed multiple times over the past several years. That's been a priority in our state at the legislative level, and has been welcome to the taxpayers that you see it's compressed from $1.17 per 100 all the way down to 75 cents per 100. So that is a lot of information in one short slide, and I will just pause for a second if there's any discussion, questions that we need to have. We have a full team here tonight that can help answer those.
I could. One of the comments I got from a few committee members, and if you could speak to the House and Question Works, some of them asked me, they were like, well, of course you have deferred maintenance. You chose to lower your tax rate 40 cents over the last decade. So why did you do that instead of invest in the maintenance of your facility? So can you kind of speak to how the M&O tax rate is calculated and sort of the parameters that exist around that?
So there's two levels to the M&O tax rate. There's a tier 1 and a tier 2. The tier 2 gives us discretion over the tax rate. That's the portion we can control as a district. The tier 1, which is the biggest chunk of that tax rate, is basically calculated by the Texas Education Agency, and as our property values grow, that rate is compressed, and they do those calculations for us. And so currently we're about to submit that to TEA tomorrow. And what they do is they compare the prior year values to current year, and as those values are growing, that rate is compressed. And so that is defined by the state. So we have no control over that portion. There is a portion that you can get some additional funding from a local level, and we've already got about 13.83 pennies out there at that tier 2 level of the tax rate for the M&O.
Okay. So just clarifying, that was changes in the calculation and additional funding from the state,
Yes.
but that was not locally the board saying
Right.
we're just going to
Right.
cut the.
Yeah, we don't have
20
control
cents.
over that tier 1 portion of the rate.
And the portion that we control, we don't actually control, right? I mean, it's voter control. So, you know, those pennies we have to go out for election.
Exactly. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this slide?
I would just make a comment that I think what gets confusing to the taxpayers is, even though it looks like the tax rate is going down, they're always questioning, well, why are my overall taxes going up? And just to point out that when the value of the house goes up, you know,
Right.
that goes up. And I think that's part of why the state has required that when we do go out for a bond, that we put that verbiage in there that, hey, I think it actually says tax rate on the verbiage. And even though the tax rate necessarily won't be going up, taxes do go up when property values
Exactly.
go up. And so that looks great, that those are kind of, that those are going down, but the taxpayers are always like, well, why is this happening that we're getting charged more? Well, the rate might go down, but if the property values have gone up 40%,
Exactly.
well, your taxes are going to go up.
Yes, the compression is not significant enough to counteract the value growth.
And that's why one of the legislative priorities that the board adopted was around the language that you have to put on bonds. Not to say that the taxes wouldn't necessarily go up based on property values, but it's the use of the tax rate that causes confusion as well. And so that's why that was one of the legislative priorities for the board, is can we get language that is clear and transparent to taxpayers. But that very issue is really difficult in the last bond, because you're saying the tax rate won't go up, but the bond language says the tax rate will go up, and it just caused some confusion. So,
Melissa, another common question among folks is, just like Riley's talking about, if my property taxes are going up and the rate's going down, why is BISD not getting more money?
Because,
I
because
know it's a rhetorical
yes,
question, but
exactly. So we're tied to formula funding, so it's on a per student basis.
Right, so just because we collect a lot more money, 40% or whatever it was over the last umpteen years, that doesn't mean that our budget's going to increase by the same amount, right?
That's correct, yeah. It's all dependent upon your student attendance, your
Right.
enrollment, and your attendance rates.
questions?
You may have said this, but do you suspect that TEA is going to compress it even more?
For this year,
For this
well,
year?
they've already set the compression, so they set a floor and a ceiling.
Okay.
And currently, based on what I'm running, our M&O rate will be basically the same rate we have for the current year. It'll be the 75.52 cents.
Okay.
So this is a campus timeline. This is something that we spent a little time talking with the bond advisory committee about. That I do think it's interesting when you look at this. 8 of our 21 campuses have been new since 2011. So Belton has historically saw growth, but not at the rate that we've seen over the last 15 years or so. And just for the last decade, we've grown at an average of 300 students a year, which I think comes out to about 2.8%. So a lot of the 21 campuses that we have, 8 of those have opened as new construction over the past 4 bonds and since 2011. So we've seen that the considerate growth. One of the things that we talked about as we worked through a needs assessment and really looked at the current state of our facilities and where we felt and where we asked our stakeholders on what they felt like were the most important needs, is that our current board, our past boards, past administrations were really aggressive on capacity over the last 4 bonds, and we're really probably in the best place we've been in the past decade or so from a capacity standpoint. I think it's interesting too as well, if you look back over the past 11 bonds, 9 of those 11 bonds did have some type of renovation addition of older facilities, and only 2 of those past 11 bonds were just for new schools only. So that's been kind of the history of looking at Belton ISD as a totality, and with the growth of the district, even in those fast growth years, there still have been needs at times to reinvest in older facilities. And it's really interesting to see. We have campuses that opened in the 1950s that are still vibrant and used today and serve students well, but that hasn't come without investment at some point in time over the past 70 years in those facilities.
Okay, in the second bond advisory committee meeting, we invited Jennifer Ritter to provide a financial update, a bond capacity update for our committee. And if you'll notice, this looks very similar to to this slide. But this is the slide deck for today. It's been updated, so she is here this evening. We're inviting Jennifer up to share some updated information. So it has changed slightly since the last time we talked with the the Bond Advisory Committee. And so, Jennifer, I think you know everybody here. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me.
Do you want to control the?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll mess it up a couple of times.
We'll succeed.
Yeah. So we have a brief presentation just to update you. The big change between now and what we talked to the committee about is the passage by the legislature of the increase in the homestead exemption from $100,000 to $140,000. Last Friday, the district received preliminary values from the appraisal district that include that additional $40,000 homestead exemption. Of course, it doesn't get approved until November, but the assumption is that obviously people will vote to approve a tax decrease. So I think that's a pretty fair assessment. So we are using now the $140,000 homestead exemption, whereas before we were looking at a $100,000 homestead exemption. Not surprising, Belton has a lot of rooftops, so when we increase the homestead exemption by 40%, there will be a little bit of a reduction in capacity as a result of that. So let's see what we got here. So we now have, with the additional $40,000 homestead exemption as published by Belcan, a decrease in your values. So the preliminary estimates that we had looked at with the committee before were assuming I think it was 9.5% growth in the tax base year over year. When they incorporated this $40,000 increase in the homestead, it actually is a 0.5% drop in values. It's a one-time hit. Once this homestead goes into place, thereafter you start to grow at more of a usual pace, but we do have that to deal with. School districts that were able to pass a May election are all sort of rushing to market this month essentially to sell, so they'll be held harmless with the new homestead. But obviously anybody who issues after September 1st of this year will not be. So the assumptions that we're using here to be conservative as well, we're using 2.2% annual growth in the tax base after this year. Again, there's a 0.5% drop. I think when we take out the new homestead exemption, you actually still grew by about 6%, 6 to 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah, around 6%.
Yeah, so there still actually is growth if there weren't that homestead increase, but going forward, we're only assuming 2.2%. That's based upon essentially the last 5 years, I think we're roughly 4.5%, so we cut that in half to come up with what we thought was an even more conservative assumption going forward. So that's baked into these numbers. We're using a 30-year interest rate of 5.25%. Were you to sell today, it'd probably be closer to 4.75%. So we still have cushion built in there on the interest rate. In this model as well, a little bit of a difference is that we're waiting to sell a few months in the new year past when we would have sold. Of course, that depends on when the district actually needs the fund. So that'll be a conversation that we have should the bond pass, or should you call it in the bond pass. But this is showing a couple of months waiting to sell those new bonds. And then we're also assuming that in the interim, you have some fund balance that through good management, through interest earnings that have grown in the debt service account. That debt service fund balance can only be used to pay off debt. It can't be transferred to M&O. It can't be used to lower the bond amount either. It can only be used to pay debt service on an issued bond. So to use some of that money in the interim between now and the end of the year to pay off some existing debt and get some relief, pay off some principal, that'll create savings of about $5.5 million. So we're targeting some bonds that we could do this year. So this assumes that in that model. And then using some additional fund balance beyond that from INS to essentially lower the INS tax rate by using the money that you've got in that INS account each year to buy down the debt rate. So with those new assumptions in place, too small to see. We have this in here for anybody who has detailed questions, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But essentially, we had been at 173 million was our capacity 2 months ago with no tax increase. We're now at 149.7, so call it 150 million. So that reduction of 23 million is a result of that increase in the homestead exemption. So again, this will continue to evolve as we get closer to the election date, but with the information that we have today, with Potentially, I haven't heard of any legislative changes between now and the special session and possibly future special sessions that would have an impact on this further, but we need to be cognizant that there could be something that would come up that would also have an impact there. So at the moment, we are projecting a capacity for you guys of 149.78 million, rounded up, we'll call it 150 million, with a single issuance should you call an election and should it pass in November. I also wanted to point out here, I heard the comment that on this column that says existing debt service, that represents principal and interest, so it shows here 585 million of existing debt service. That's the total combined. The district's principal, or what you might refer to as your outstanding debt, is 369 million. So I just wanted to point that out for the group that it's not, this is sort of the total payments that you have coming up. Theoretically, we'll most likely go in and do some defeasances between now and when those would mature, do some refundings for savings. So that's why we generally will refer to the principal as opposed to the outstanding debt service. So a couple of other options here. Again, with no increase, it's 149.78 million. If you wanted to increase the tax rate by a penny over the 39.42, you could go up to 161 million, call it 162 with rounding. For a 3-cent increase from, again, 39 to 42 cents, you could do 168 million. And then what we haven't done at Belton, but a lot of districts will do, and some districts in the Metroplex, you'll see they go out and they ask the voters to approve $1 billion, and then they issue it as they have the ability to do so. We don't really do that too much, but what we have done in the past is sort of projects that can be broken up in terms of construction projects, phasing them in over a couple of years. It's difficult to spend large amounts of money, as you all know better than I do, with construction. So by phasing it, you might be able, for example, if you wanted to do 200 million, and we just throwing that number out there. If you wanted to ask the voters to approve that, you might be able to come back and do 100 million next year and then wait until the following year or the following year to do the remaining 100 million. Splitting it up that way obviously helps you to not pay interest on the debt before it's needed to be spent, but it also allows, as the tax base grows, as you get past this homestead exemption increase year, it allows greater capacity with no tax increase because we're getting back into the growth phase of your tax base. So you haven't phased it yet. It is, I would say, relatively common for districts to do that. So in this case, we looked at what you could do if you were to phase it over 3 years, and it would be about 120 million initially, and then coming back the following 2 years with $40 million apiece each year. So that's just one option that you could consider if you needed a larger number than what we're showing here in the numbers of the 150 to 168 million. So the homestead exemption obviously is our sort of unknown at the moment, even though it hasn't passed. Obviously that's the number that we're using. You aren't going to meet the hold harmless, but you will still be held harmless for the money that you're getting currently for the other prior homestead exemptions, and not taking away that what they call the ASAAG payment. You'll still be getting that payment, but we don't know exactly what that is. And we've tried to guesstimate it, but we don't know what it is until they come back and publish that, which will probably happen if history repeats itself. The last time they increased the homestead exemption, you guys are in a little bit of a difficult spot because it didn't actually publish that information until the following spring after it was passed. So a lot of this is we're still having to guesstimate what we think that whole harmless payment will be. And I think we've done a decent job of it, but none of these numbers are going to be finalized until the comptroller's numbers come out on their property values, and that'll probably be months in advance. So that was all the updates here. Happy to answer any questions should you have them specifically about the debt.
And if you want me to go back to a slide, let me know.
The hold harmless means the state will make up the difference?
That's correct, yeah. So essentially, some of your debt was issued back when the homestead exemption was $15,000. So every time that got passed, because that debt had been issued when it was at that level, so the 15 to the 25 to the 40 to the 100, they essentially have models that TA puts together that track what bond, and if it's refunded, it goes along with the refunding as well, but what bond is associated with that homestead exemption, and then they pay you for money that you would have been receiving on that debt if the homestead exemption was still the level at which it was issued. So, for example, you're getting currently almost $4 million in hold harmless payments from the state. As those bonds pay off, that goes away. So, you know, you can't count on it forever, but in the interim, it is a pretty significant number.
Hopefully I can say this correctly. So with this hold harmless that we're talking about, how it goes back, if we were to take that money from past bonds and then pay down past bonds, we could potentially be hurting ourselves, right? Like not taking it back because we're receiving that hold harmless money. Does that make, I don't know.
No, you're raising a valid point, right? Like, so, so it is a good point that, you know, that debt that was issued back when the homestead was $25,000 is pretty valuable because the state's paying a share of that debt, and they're not paying it for new bonds, for example, right? So, yes, you raise a very valid point that is, but at the same time, you are paying interest on it as well. So it's kind of a balance that you have to look at. But no, to your point, that is a concern.
But if we were rolling it into something else, we'd be paying interest on that as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, ideally what we would do is be able to use that money that you have in the debt service account to make payments on a new bond, which is kind of what you've done because that's going to have the highest interest rate, no hold harmless on it. But, you know, if there is a you know, desire within the community to try and get some of this principal down and pay off debt early, you have that option as well. So what we looked at doing was a combination of the two, using some of that fund balance that y'all have built up through conservative budgeting to offset any tax increase with this potential new bond, as well as maybe go in and pay off some old debt as well. You don't have to do it that way. You could do one or the other. We're just trying to take the money that you've got and make it make the most sense for the districts. But those are discussions, and you raise an excellent point.
Thank you.
The 140, is there an additional homestead exemption for seniors or over 65, or is it just 140 across the board?
No, so they're frozen. So the frozen collections are also a separate column in here. And then they got adjusted this year. You probably know more about it than I do as well.
Yeah, the hold harmless incorporates both the frozen and just the regular collections.
So your model is, if we go back a couple of slides, if y'all don't mind, sorry. That's why there's so many columns. Yeah, exactly. So we've got, you know, defeasance that we're paying off, debt service fund balance, the ASAHE, which is the state's hold harmless, less frozen tax revenues, which are the over 65. So that's why it's, and then some of this, the AG's office won't let us use on the 50-cent test per their own agency rules. So it's a little bit more complex, which is why I know this slide's very busy, but why we show it just to be able to answer those questions should someone have them. But yeah, to your point, the over 65 and the frozen get handled a little bit separately as well.
Any other questions for Jennifer? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Jennifer, again for presenting to the Bond Advisory Committee as well as this evening to our board. In our second meeting, they received that information as well as presented to them projects under safety and security program needs, replacement cycles, and asked these 3 questions in that meeting. Just, were we missing anything? Were there any concerns about the items that had been listed? Any questions? We asked them to give us questions each time so that we could start the next meeting off addressing some of those questions. And during that time from meeting 2 to meeting 3, we also went out to seek some feedback from our community that historically votes in elections and in bonds, and I think Matt Gamble is actually joining us online. I see a little icon up there for Matt. Matt, can you hear us?
He's muted.
He's muted.
Can you help him?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Sorry,
awesome.
it took me a minute to get the microphone.
All right, I'm going to do my best, Matt, to advance the slides for you. And so, so Matt Gamble works for Base Lease, who is the surveying company that we asked to conduct this survey. We used them in 2022 as well. And so, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, we interviewed 300 respondents in the district using a mix of, can you all hear me okay? I hear an echo, right?
We got you.
A mix of live interviewing and text-to-web, where we texted an invite to on the handheld device and they could take it on their phone. The market error to a sample of this size is 5.7%. This is the same sample size we used when we did the last bond survey before your last bond. Let me go ahead and move to the next slide. I'm sorry, am I advancing this or someone else?
It's not advancing. Becca, can you advance it? Sorry, Matt, hang on just a second.
No problem.
I promise I proved I could do it earlier.
No worries. I love technology.
Okay, we're working on it. Hold on just a sec.
Okay. So I think the next slide they're going to show you is the questionnaire format, or objectives. Here we go. Our objectives were threefold. We wanted to measure initial levels of support for bond proposals, and that's sort of the beginning of the questionnaire. We want to ask that before we ask really anything else, because we're trying to gauge how they would vote if the election were today or tomorrow, and they didn't know any other information other than what was printed on their ballot. So oftentimes ballot language can be pretty vague, and anything that's not printed on that ballot is going to be something that the voter is going to need to hear either from like a PAC or from the district or from the news media or from a friend. So the initial ballot just lets us know where we're starting, assuming they know nothing else about the proposal. The second thing we wanted to do was test the favorability of different bond projects and give them more information about the bonds. It lets us do two things. First, we know how much support there is for a certain type of project, and then by doing that, by going through all of these different elements of the bond package, we're informing them about what it's actually doing. So we're sort of running a miniature campaign. And at the end of the survey, we come back and say, now that you've heard more information, how would you vote? And that really lets us know kind of max potential if everybody who votes got all of our information, and they're really informed how they feel about that. And both of those data points are important. So if we look at the next slide, you're going to see the initial ballot and the informed ballot. There's a lot of numbers on here. I'll walk you through this. For the three different props, A, B, and C. So in our survey, Prop A was $143 million for general bonds. Prop B was $41 million for the fields, and Prop C was $9 million for technology devices. I don't know where things have landed on whether you're able to do this with or without a property tax increase, but for the purposes of this, it doesn't really matter, because the ballot language has to say it's a property tax increase. So let's start with Prop A and look at question 2, the initial ballot. 40% would vote for it, 49% would vote against, 11% are unsure. Behind the for and against, there's intensity. That's, do you feel strongly about it or just somewhat? And you see those are in brackets. So it's 14% strongly for, 33% strongly against. You'll notice that, like on this initial position, the intensity is almost twice, it's more than twice as large on the no side than the yes side. And that's common at the beginning of the campaign. You don't really need to know. When people are against it, they're kind of just against bonds in general. They're against more taxes. And people that are for it are just somewhat for it because they don't really know what it's really doing. It's hard to be really excited about it. Over to the right there, you see an average extrapolated for. And what that does is it looks at the proportion of people who have an opinion and the proportion of people who have a strong opinion. So you can't go vote unsure. right? So only 91% of the respondents had an opinion. The ratio or proportion of the 40 to the 49, average with the 14 and the 33, gets you 37.4%. So that's really what we would be looking at if the election were tomorrow and voters didn't get any information. That's actually really close to, almost identical to where we started on the last survey on the initial ballot for general bonds. That one was 38.6% extrapolated for. Now, when they hear more information on the informed position, 54% would vote for, 37% would vote against. Intensity, we have a 4-point advantage. When we average all of that together, we get 56.8%. So a lot of movement when voters learn more about the proposal. The way this compares to the last bond survey that we did, we had 49.1% support at the very end. So we saw that kind of like a razor thin toss-up. And then keep in mind it's a 5.7% margin of error. So we had it at 49% at the end, and we know the actual result was 50.4%. So the survey was pretty accurate in terms of that informed position. We look like we're starting off in about the same position, but ending up at a little bit more favorable. Still with that 5.7% margin of error, this could be pretty close. So kind of looking like the last bond. For Prop B, we start out at 16.5%, and I'll just read down the margins for the following ones. 16.5%, it's very, very low, obviously, but that is kind of common. Most athletic props just don't receive a lot of initial support, and it's also common that a lot of them don't receive over 50% support at the end of the survey. This, unfortunately, is just kind of what voter sentiment is. The only times you really see a lot of support are in heavily Democratic districts where you've got a large number of Democrat voters who just love schools. And in these parts of Texas, it's a bit tougher. It's a bit more of a mixed Republican and Democrat electorate. And so, you have sometimes less support. For Prop C, through electronic learning devices, we start off at 39.8 and grow to 56.5. These track very similarly to general bonds. And I know there was some concerns that you're hearing from some voters about technology devices, but they really track very closely to general bonds, like I said. And we saw that actually in the election. 50.1% for Prop A, and the technology prop won by 2 votes. And so that's kind of reflected here. But again, good movement when they hear more information. Now let's go to the next slide. So this is one of, I think, 2 or 3 slides where we'll show you the information that we gave the respondent between the initial ballot and the informed ballot. This page here shows you all the projects, or some of the projects that we tested. And with each one, we're saying, do you favor or oppose this part of the bond? You'll notice that in the blue column, you have support over 50% for all these projects, and in many cases, it's in the 60s or 70s. The project with the least support, 52% is still a majority, was the project at Joe Purtle Elementary School, where we said that we would allow for a new attached gym as the next step in the district's long-range plan to bring all elementary schools to this standard. But a lot of support for all of these projects. You'll note that, remember, we ended up at the informed position at 54% for. So you see people are more likely to like certain elements of the bond than they are to actually vote for it. And that happens all the time. So you kind of have to question who would be against safety and security improvements, right? But some people are for it, but they're not necessarily going to vote for the bond. And that's okay. But let's move on to the next slide. This one here is the next half of the projects that we tested. And again, over 50% support for everything. Let's see. Question 16, that second one on your page, that's the last one really that's relating to Prop A. And then we got into this conversation about the Prop B and Prop C. I'll walk you through that because that's a little bit more specific. We see that 50% to 59% of voters support the projects at the fields, depending on how we talk to them about it. The element that they liked most was really talking about the bond adding visitor locker rooms to Tiger Field to enhance player safety and moving the band back to the home side. So it was more things about kind of how this impacts the students compared to question 18 where we talked about upgrades to Tiger Field that were more kind of like brick and mortar turf and LED lighting and bleachers and scoreboards. That was 53%. When we look at the technology prop, question 21 and 22 at the bottom there, 63 to 61% support based on the information that we told them. And we can move to the next one. So those first two slides were about projects. This is about just different elements of the bond. This can apply to all fronts. In question 23, we told them inflation has driven up construction costs, and passing a bond now saves taxpayers money. Schools don't receive funding from the state for building schools or making major renovations. This is done through bonds, which are like payback like a mortgage. The next one, upgrades and renovations from the bond would improve heating, cooling, energy costs, leading to greater efficiencies. You've got a AA bond rating to save taxpayers millions of dollars in the most recent bond sale. If each of these were saying, does this make you favor or oppose the bond? So in that case, 67% said, okay, I favor the bond, why did you tell me that? We told them that seniors have their property taxes frozen and wouldn't be impacted by this. And then the last one on your page there, it says next year homeowners will get a tax credit of $38 per month and voters approve an increase in the homestead exemption. If the bonds pass, the average home could instead get a reduction of between $35 to $37 per month. Again, we kind of, those numbers were in flux when we went into the field, so we just kind of covered our bases for what we thought it might be. And then lastly, we told them that you can't use bond funds for teacher pay, it's got to be used for capital projects. 55% are still supportive of that when you say, hey, we can't use this to pay teachers more money. So just to kind of overview, initially majority of respondents would vote against all these prompts. With the general bond and the technology, it's really where we were the last go round. Despite initial levels of opposition, we see that a majority of respondents favor all the projects, even the athletics. They like the things you want to do. It's just the hurdle of getting over that dollar amount and that language that says it's a tax increase. When they learn more about it, we see a majority will support the general bonds and the technology bonds. We're not in that place with the Stadia bonds. It's still plurality are against it. The most appealing elements of the general bond, we did some additional analysis and looked at what correlated most with support. Knowing that seniors have their taxes frozen, safety and security improvements, saving money by acting now, those are some of the best elements of this bond package. The outcomes are ultimately going to depend on what information people get and how much they get. So what is it the mix of positive or negative or even inaccurate information, right? So we can't control police the accuracy of Facebook comments, but this was all positive stuff or what it would do. The other thing is how much, you're gonna have, this is easy for us to do, to have someone on the phone for 15 minutes and read them these questions and get their response. Replicating this in reality in a campaign is a lot more challenging because you have to do a lot of message repetition and really kind of burn that message in. There's a reason why you're throwing things at your TV the last week of a presidential election because you're tired of hearing those ads. Well, it works, So how much information and what they get is going to dictate the result and also who turns out to vote. And so the table below shows you the initial support and the informed support in these different types of subgroups. So the more parents we get to the polls, the better we'll do. The more supportive we are parents. So all of those are sort of variables in place, but long and short of it is pretty much looking like, just like last time, with a little bit more support at the end of the survey.
Awesome, thank you,
So
Matt.
I can take any questions if anyone has any.
Matt, was the sample size large enough to break out over 65 as a
Yes.
discrete group besides just non-parents?
Yes, they are large enough to break out on their own group.
Yeah, do you have that, like, how did that group poll?
Yeah, let me look real quick. Just need 30 seconds to find it. We're probably going to be pretty close to that non-parent number just because they represent such a large portion of the non-parents. That's a great question because, as you know, they make up a large chunk of the voters. One more second. So I'm going to read you the favor opposed. I don't have it in that like a fancy extrapolated number. But initially, the favor for Prop A was 41, opposed was 46. The total sample was 40 to 49. So they're not far off just the average voter. Non-parents were 38-52. So seniors are pretty close to that. I'll read you the informed ballot for Prop A, and then if you want the other props, I can go back. So seniors on Prop A were 56% for, 32% against. The non-parents were 53-38. So the net with the non-parents was a +15, the net with the seniors was a +24. So they're a little bit more supportive than the non-parents.
How about on Prop B?
Prop B, their net is a +6, and the net of the non-parents was a -6. So you can see that sometimes. What's happening is the 50 to 55 to 64-year-olds and even the younger non-parents are kind of dragging it down. And sometimes, especially at the end of a survey, the seniors can be pretty supportive because you've told them their taxes are frozen. So they're at a +6 on that at the end. And then on Prop C at the end, they are a +27 compared to just the non-parent overall is a +12.
Board, do you have any other questions for Matt? No? Okay. All right.
Well,
Thank you so
again.
much. Thank you, Matt. If we
Yeah,
get more
okay.
questions.
Have a good one.
Okay, we'll reach out to you. Thank
Oh,
you, Matt.
Not for him.
Oh,
Yeah, call myself if another question comes up. I'm around.
Did you have a question?
Not for him.
Oh,
Just
okay.
for us after this.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So what does the district do to inform, and what is the cost typically of doing that?
So I don't have the cost amount. Would you be able to
Do you
help
know
me? I mean, what we did,
generally
what
is?
was done last time is a lot of meetings. So going to different organizations, every campus, just having they called it the road show. It basically was an information slide deck on the projects and what would be in the bond. And so it was a matter of just going to different meetings across the town, different stakeholder groups, and sharing that information. I think there were some information sheets created of, like, if you're at Belton Middle School, for example, what would be included in Belton Middle School's bond. So I think there were some information sheets created by the communications team. I can probably get you a better answer. I think it was just mainly information that's completely separate from a PAC, obviously. The district, if the board decides to call a bond, can inform of the information in it. We can't advocate for or against a bond.
So we don't pay for any phone calls to people, the district doesn't
No.
do anything like that? Okay.
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we? So this was the information shared to the Bond Advisory Committee. And so they were presented 3 options, and within the options, there were options around Proposition A, B, and C. And so we shared those options. You see the dollar amounts associated with those options. And then we asked them the question, would you recommend this to the board for consideration? And then they would give us some feedback on why or why not. And so of the three options presented, option one was the one favored by the Bond Advisory Committee. And then with their why or why not comments, we then took that information, we took option one, took their feedback, and then presented, those were the props that we then presented to the community that Thursday night for community input in a face-to-face option, and then asked for the same feedback in an online survey. And so what we would like to do is start, and let me go back real quick, those tax rate dollars are no longer applicable. That was the information we shared at the time. That has since changed with the updated information that Jennifer provided you this evening. And so what we'd like to do next is dig into those options. So one thing I'd like to point out, and I'll explain more in a little bit, you heard me say we provided options for a potential Prop A, B, and C in each of these. Based on feedback from the Bond Advisory Committee, a fourth option, a Prop D, emerged from their feedback. And so that has to do with the swim center. And when we get to that piece, I'll talk more about why it wasn't originally brought to the committee. And then we'll show you what the recommendation from the committee was. Okay. So I think Mike's going to walk us through, and I probably won't hand this.
Sure.
If you'll pass that around. So this slide is just, again, we started with information to a budget advisory committee. We did the voter survey that you just heard Matt Gamble talk about. We gathered questions and input from the community survey, all in which is informing the conversation tonight. And that's what Mike's going to dig deep into.
Yeah, and so I'll start talking through the Prop A. And one thing that you'll see on the next four slides is pay attention to in the pricing column. If the pricing is red, then that means we've carried this. It's been an identical item that went to our Bond Advisory Committee, went to the community group, and then we're discussing here tonight. You're going to see some of the projects where there's been a reduction in scope based on information or feedback that was given from the advisory committee or the community round. You're going to see some that have been pulled from the discussion tonight. We're leaving them in because we want you to know that we gathered input on them. But if it's in a gray, in a light gray, then I'll make sure and point those out. Then those are ones that we're not recommending move forward in the discussion. But obviously, y'all will have a chance to weigh in and give feedback on that as well. And then there's a couple of items, as Melinda said, on the natatorium swim center issues. There was also one more item that was added to the list, and one more item that came off the list after the budget, the Bond Advisory Committee, and I'll point those out as we go through as well.
Well, you're still on this slide. Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
sure.
So replace fire alarm systems. To be, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but our fire alarm systems are just fine as they are right now, isn't that right?
They're operational. They're passing inspection and operational.
Right.
Yes.
So where this comes from is if we start tearing things apart in these schools, that then we need to update the system to get it up to code. So if we start rebuilding, right? So really these don't need replacing as much as if we start digging in and doing construction in the buildings. Then are we required to get it up to code? Is that where that $7 million comes from?
In some cases, that will be exactly, especially when we get into some of the ADA improvements that would have to be made. The fire alarm system data came from our facilities assessment, and we had a whole group of campuses that have systems that are just about at end of life. And so we are in a situation where for right now, we're still maintaining the systems. They're still passing inspection, but with each year, as that system gets older, they're going to become more expensive to operate and maintain. And then eventually, they will be aged out that you won't be able to get replacement parts, equipment, control panels, those sorts of things any longer. So On the campuses that are on this list, only BMS, Lakewood, DAEP, and Sparta are the only ones that are up for considerable renovations. The others are just those that are at the end of the life of the system.
Thank you.
Any other details on that, Steve, that I dropped off?
That was
It's
correct.
just a cost to maintain, and then you eventually get to a point where you're several generations deep and there's no longer replacement parts. Now you're trying to find parts on Amazon or wherever, and then at some point you may not be able to find parts at all. So none of those, they're all still operational at this point. It's really looking toward the future and making sure that we have fire alarm systems that, from a technology standpoint, and are good for the next 2.5 decades or so till they'd have to be replaced again.
Do we ever purchase parts ahead of time in case those are coming to an end, or do we, coming to the end of their life cycle? Do we ever consider that? I mean, that's $7 million to upgrade these systems. If we just purchase the parts that regularly go out, I would imagine we do that sort of thing, don't we?
We do. We have an alarm specialist, Lloyd Cosper, and he works on all of our elevators, fire alarm systems, access control, those sorts of things. And he has a fairly substantial budget that he does on alarm repair and replacement every year. But to the extent of how much we inventory those items that we think will come offline, I could check with him and see. I bet as much as he can. I bet he probably doesn't have the budget to do tons of it. But I do know, like when we put in our DOS, the radio systems that are compatible with first responders, we did have to replace the control panel at Lakewood because that model was not compatible with the rest of the system. So those are the types of issues you run into. Your fire system and your DOS system have to talk to each other, and that control board was old enough that it wouldn't talk to the DOS radio system for first responders. So we did have to replace it at the time. So that's an example of the types of things you run into.
I have a question, Mike. So I understand that all of these campuses will be affected or need one or more of these items, and you may or may not have it with you. Is there something that shows us exactly what Bex needs from this or Belton High School needs from this list? Because I think if we do, I think go out for a bond. I think people are going to want to know what exactly is Leon Heights getting. What exactly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we would do that, Erin, so that each campus has a detailed picture of what would be included.
Because that's what you were saying earlier, what we did for the individual presentations.
And we have a master checklist with all, but since they're broken down into the 3 main areas, we kind of did it by project type for right now. But yeah, we definitely have that information and can speak specifically to it tonight if there's a question about a specific campus or project. But as we prepare to whatever happens as we communicate out, we would be very clear on that. I will talk about exterior lighting for a second. That is, this would be a phase 2 of exterior lighting packages. We had phase 1 in our 2022 bond, and this basically includes taking exterior lighting. A lot of it is replacement of older systems with LED, much more energy efficient, dependable. Also, the ability to program for energy efficiency, that you can turn them on at the times of day when you need them, turn them off at the times of day when you don't, more efficiently. And then in some cases where there are no exterior lights, adding lighting systems to those as well. That was one of the things that was not included in the last bond. We've done lighting assessments of each facility and getting lighting in those areas. We do have a large amount of staff, especially in the winter, that gets to school before sun's up. And so having lit parking areas and lit areas of the school is important to them, so it's important to us. But and then, as Riley mentioned, replace the fire alarm systems. Hopefully I touched on that one. It is a big price tag item, but it does impact, I think, 12 campuses. Upgrade playground fencing. One of the things that we would like to do in our next phase, we've had 3 phases of playground improvements. The next phase in playground improvements would be to establish 6-foot fencing with gates with emergency egress at each elementary and our early childhood campuses. That is something that we would like to do, and we tried to get as much of that done and qualify some of that in TEA safety grants, but perimeter fencing was not qualifiable, and I can speak a little bit more about that as far as safety goes. And then updating video surveillance. This would be district-wide for the campuses that don't currently have cloud-based video. We have a lot of cameras that are server-based. They're nearing, many are at or near the end of their useful life. And just like we were able to do at our new campuses in this last bond at Belton High and UTech, being able to go to cloud-based, there's several advantages. Number one, you don't have to buy and maintain servers over the course of the life of the cameras. You can store the memory, you can store longer, you can leave the cameras on for longer periods of time, and then you can go back and retrieve at a longer duration. It also allows, you're not bound to the size of your server on how many cameras you can have. So if there's a camera that needs to be added somewhere that there currently isn't one with the cloud-based, you could meet that need as well. Am I leaving anything out on that, Shad?
No, I think, well, that, another other part of that is with the newer system, it's not specific to a Mac or a PC or a Windows phone or Android phone. This gives SROs or even police, local police the ability, we can give them access to those cameras for an hour, a week, a month. So if something's going on, right then and there, we can share a link to them and they have access to what's going on inside that building without having to be on our network.
And for campus administrators
Yeah.
as well, it gives them the ability to do it on their phones or on their computers. Where our current system, they don't have that opportunity unless they're on the school network, correct?
Correct.
So I'm always just curious of how the M&O and INS funds just kind of are tending to intermingle. When you're bringing up the cloud, it sounds like that is, I mean, are we talking about actual cameras and the system in the school now, or actually using some of those funds to purchase the?
It's cameras themselves that have on-board storage, but then it's also sunk to the cloud. And so when you buy that camera, they give you the ability to store all that data on their cloud-based servers. So it gives you, basically the ones we're buying currently are 30-day retention. And so now if we have 30-day retention and you have, 70 cameras on a campus, if you add 10 more cameras, your retention goes less because your storage never went up. So with this, with it all being like based on the camera itself, it doesn't matter if you had 70 cameras, if you had another 70 cameras, you still get 30-day retention.
Okay.
I think, is there a residual cost of cloud storage?
There is, like, so the ones we bought for this last bond, we bought 10-year warranty and licensing. So for 10 years, we don't have to touch them. If in 6 years that camera goes bad, they'll send us the newest model. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions on safety? I will speak quickly to the TEA, the safety, especially cycle 1. That was the bigger grant. We spent every penny of that grant that we could on allowable expenses. So what you're seeing here is some of the remaining items that we either haven't been able to cover out of our M&O budget or we were not able to cover through the TEA Cycle 1 safety grant, which was the big grant. We did receive the TEA Cycle 2 safety grant, but it was a substantially less amount of money, and it will be used towards some of our ongoing safety costs, and we're appreciative for that. But this is kind of the next phase of safety. This is one that in our community survey or our community input and our bond advisory input very favorably, people were in favor of next layers of. So we are in compliance with all TEA safety standards. These are some additional layers of safety and security that we would like to consider, or we consider needs at this time. And so this is the replacement cycles, and this is really 5 areas, and you can see, just to kind of go back to our color code, you can see the HVAC systems has a black, which means it has been updated. There was a scope of work for Lake Belton Middle School that was included in the final, the version we're talking about tonight. You can see roofing, asphalt paving, and technology infrastructure have remained the same. And you can see classroom furniture is the light gray. That is one that you can, it actually polled on the voter survey fairly well, 60% I believe, but when we got feedback from the bond advisory and from our community groups, there were some concerns around including classroom furniture as a as a large group. I think there were 11 campuses that were included in that. We've kind of looked at possibly an approach, kind of like we did in the last bond, that if we're going to go in and do some significant and substantial renovations at a campus, look at addressing furniture at that time, and then do what we can through our purchasing department out of our M&O, just knowing that we will not do full campus replacements and not to the extent. We usually look at about 10-year minimum on furniture life, and we have 12 campuses right now that are at 10 years or past 10 years. With the new strategy that does bring the total cost of the bond down, it would be the campuses where we have significant the programmatic needs and the renovations would be the ones that would see some furniture replacement, and the other campuses would wait until it's their turn in the cycles for renovations in the future.
Just kind of a similar question, like all these are maintenance items, at least the HVAC, the roofing, asphalt. So what are the legalities? Like, is it okay to mix the two funds like that? Like to use bond funds for maintenance? And I mean, so the legalities, and then kind of, have we done this in the past? Is it?
Yeah, HVAC system, it absolutely is legal to put HVAC systems into bonds. It's very common to see them in bonds. They're extremely expensive items. Mike can probably get us a breakdown of cost of HVAC systems. If there were no bonds and an HVAC system went down, I mean, what we've been doing is using on the M&O side, we've been purchasing those single classroom units to cool off a classroom, as we've had to do that on these campuses whose HVAC systems we're just constantly repairing and they're at end of life. So we have, I believe HVAC systems were in the last bond as well. Roofing as well. These roof systems, like our transportation roof, has to be replaced. We've been repairing it, we've been maintaining it, but it is at its end where we need to do a full replacement of that entire roof. So these are allowable expenditures in a proposition bond. It doesn't mean if a school district had the funds and could pay for roofing renovations or could pay for an HVAC system out of the M&O, they could do that if they had the funds to do that.
And these are systems that last longer. I mean, depending on, varies from system to system, but you're talking about a 20-year or more lifespan on most of these systems. Since 2019, we've spent $1.5 million out of our facilities budget on HVAC repair and replacement. We have also had money set aside in our M&O capital projects, and then there's several $1 million in HVAC upgrades and system replacements in the current bond. That's really the last phase of that bond. Is I think there's 7 or 8 campuses that'll be impacted. And as you know, we just brought to y'all the recommendation to do almost $900,000 worth of HVAC and dehumidification equipment at the natatorium. So yeah, really, we want to invest. We have been investing. It's just the need, and as the equipment's aging out, it's aging out faster than we're able to replace and repair.
Thank you.
Is that practice that you're both explaining, whether we're needing a bond to fully replace, or we're just comparing to other districts across the state, is that a common practice, what we're doing, as well as what others are doing?
Yes.
So we're not out of the ordinary by doing
No.
anything like this.
Any other questions about these? I do know the asphalt and paving is one that as we go to listening sessions with staff and even from parents, is one that we do patch, and you can go around to any of the 6 campuses that are included on here and see where we patched. And you can also just see where we continue to have issues, particularly, well, like I say, particularly if you want to see one on just close to here, the Becks on the east side parking lot, you can see where there's been a lot of erosion. And a lot of it's caused by drainage issues as well. So this would include coming in and fixing, if we need to fix site work, drainage, sidewalks, but also just re-asphalting as well. But it has not been something that in our older facilities, even the ones that were renovations and additions have been done, there hasn't been a significant improvement or investment in asphalt paving. And so you can tell at the older campuses where it's been patched, and usually what those patched areas, there's a reason that they have to be patched, and it's usually a drainage issue or some type of site issue that needs to be addressed.
And this is asphalt and paving that's our property that only we can pay for.
That's
and
right.
maintain.
Yeah,
So
and you can see.
none of this is like shared with the city or
That's right.
county.
These would be really our parking lots in those areas.
So, like, when I think about the HVAC systems, right, $8 million. $8 million is 5-ish% of an annual budget for us, right? And so we know salaries take up 85%-ish of the budget, right? And so another 5% of M&O, right? So, like, if we spent $8 million on HVAC out of this coming year's budget, we're taking something out of the classroom, right? So, you know, we're either impacting the little bit that's left that's not people, right? Or we're taking people out of the classroom in order to make an $8 million in-year purchase of HVAC systems. So, when I could take it over 20 years, right? Or whatever we said the useful life of the HVAC systems is.
And Steve can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what we've basically taken is from our facilities assessment data, everything that hasn't been addressed, either through M&O capital projects or in the 22 bond, that will come, that is expected to be at end of life within the next 4 to 5 years. So that's really what this captures in that.
I think one of my concerns, and I would ask you to go clear back to that first slide. We used to be paying $6 million, and I don't remember what year, 2015, and then $4 million in 2016, and then the last few years it's been. I've heard different numbers. You know, it was 1.1, I think, is what it said for about the last 3 years. So we're not even spending 1% of that $149 million budget. And so we do, and then if we look at our staff, which we're not talking about here, we have had a lot of staff for the last several years, some extra staff, according to like the TASB audit that we've had. So as I've looked at those, so anyways, just taking that into account, that we have, you know, we do have extra staff at this point, it seems like, and then we kind of let this other, the INS or we're kind of expecting that to make up the difference, so.
I mean, I think, to be fair, I think the survey says we're also short-staffed in some other places, right? So I don't think that salary or that position survey says that we're overstaffed everywhere.
No.
Yeah.
There's been significant reduction. Now, we did it through surplus. We didn't do a reduction in force, but there's been a significant reduction in staffing over the last couple of years. And I think there's a lot of competing factors that were happening in that time frame. You have the inflation costs, everything costs so significantly more during that time period. You had a slowing in growth. We're still growing, still needing teachers, but a little bit slowing of growth. You also have a significant teacher shortage. So you saw the board, and we're very thankful for that, in trying to give raises to staff during that time while experiencing a deficit budget. We also, during that time, we now get about $1.5 million less federal funds than we were getting a couple of years prior to that. So I think it's a lot of compounding factors, from inflation, from a reduction in federal funds. We have brought down a lot of the staffing numbers based on a lot of hard work of a lot of people in this room and our staff. So we're bringing those numbers down, and then while still trying to compensate staff in an extreme shortage during that time period. So I think all of that compounded the challenge of reducing the amount of dollars we were putting in the capital projects fund, for example. It was that line item that we reduced.
I think one other factor to that too, that it's a really good question, because just the context of looking at it, it looks like a significant decrease in investment over a 6-year period. In 2019, the board, and we had an interim superintendent at the time, and the board decided that to invest $3.5 million into some of our older facilities that had not been touched in the last couple of bonds. And so that money was, we had ran surplus budgets for years, and so a lot of money had been put into fund balance. So that $3.5 million, there's $3.5 million committed to those projects. It was moved out of fund balance and into the M&O. So you're going to see, I won't call it artificial because it was taken from the M&O budget, but it was $3.5 million committed out of our fund balance for capital projects that was not just in the regular department budgets that were used at that time. So it definitely, it's dollars that were spent on capital improvements. It wasn't necessarily money that, dollars that had been budgeted in those budgets. It was pulled and moved into those budgets to do a specific purpose.
You know, Riley, I understand your question and your concern when you look at that slide, but there's other factors involved, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a direct correlation between the growth of a district and bond debt. If you look at districts all across the state, the districts with the highest bond debt are the districts that have significant growth and significant number of students. We did have a fairly large fund balance, but we were saving that to open Lake Belton. So if you look at we opened since 2017 and 18, how many schools have we opened? We opened the 2 elementary schools. And then
Three
Lake Belton.
elementary schools,
Three elementary,
a high school,
and a
4
high school.
brand new campuses,
Four
and then
brand- right.
repurposed BMS.
So we had 4 brand new campuses since 2018, right? No increase in allotment over the course of all that time until here recently. So each one of those campuses, you've got all those fixed costs. You've got to power the thing. You've got increase in transportation. So you have all those incidental expenses, those fixed costs that come with opening a campus, not just bringing in new teachers and new administrators and all that. So we've had a huge amount of increase in expense since 2018. Plus we've grown, and I think I'm correct on these numbers, we've grown about 2,100 students since 2017 and 18 up until now. So we're up 2,000 students. So the amount of increase in expense has gone up exponentially, with not any assistance from the state until just this last session. I don't know what we'd have done if the state hadn't helped us this time, right? So you have to look at all those things that have happened, and then of course, 20+ percent inflation. What was that, Brandon? You're a business guy. Was it 2020?
Yeah, from 21 up to really 23, 24. So.
Right, and a lot of those things hadn't come down. I mean, what does it cost us to build a high school campus? 120 million?
I think the final was 106 on
106,
that.
but now
It's
if you
relative
do-
to square footage,
Right.
but yeah, it was 106 million, I think is what we spent on the construction costs.
Right, so when we had a fund balance, we were preparing for all the staff that we were gonna have over at Lake Belton, so we were trying to prepare for that. And of course, our fund balance has kind of trickled down. We're trying to maintain competition with other districts in the area by increasing, teacher pay and those kind of things. So, man, it's just multifactorial, and it's kind of just snowballed on us, right? And I see your concern. I mean, you look at that roofing cost, and you look at the HVAC system, you think, man, why haven't you guys used M&O throughout the years to try to maintain and replace those things? Well, part of it didn't have the money.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in the past.
We have.
It would be nice to be able to dedicate part of the fund balance, almost like a maintenance escrow, right, for the future. But you have to have money to put in there.
Yeah.
So we haven't been in a position to be able to pull the trigger on something like that. And so it's a matter of, okay, that's how we got here. This is where we are. These are the needs that we have. So now how do we pay for those needs, right? So like I said, it's 5%. It's like 5-ish% of an annual M&O. So how do you pay for $8 million in HVAC work that needs to be done? I mean, that's what we're facing today, right?
When I first saw the cost of HVAC system, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I had no idea that there was that kind of cost with replacing an HVAC system on a campus. I mean, I thought that's got to be wrong. I mean, it's just like, it's just crazy expensive, you know? I just don't think in those, because I don't live in that world.
I'll tell you, we're replacing them in my office right now, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You make a really good point there, Emmanuel, about all of, 5 years, 6 years, so 2019, that there was no raise in the annual student allotment, so
Right.
I get why some of that pressure did come. Because these funds do kind of, they matter to each other, right?
Right,
Nick?
right.
My question, can you just remind me, now built into the legislation, aren't we getting like a 2%? Isn't it built in that we'll get a 2% increase each year with the basic allotment? Does that sound right?
No, I think as they raise the basic allotment, they will reduce the guaranteed yield on the golden pennies.
Sorry, as they raise the,
Yeah, so as they raise the basic allotment, so what the intent was is because every year the golden penny yield increases every biennium. And so as that increases the basic allotment, since now it's pulling from there, that's how they funded us through House Bill 2, was the basic allotment increased by using dollars from the guaranteed yield. And so we'll go into next year, and because the guaranteed yield is supposed to change, then it goes into the basic allotment. So we'll see a little bit of a bump.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, we're gonna get an increase here, but you're gonna
Yeah,
get
but
a
they're taking
decrease
it
here.
from-
Don't look at this over here, don't notice the decrease, right? They just want you to hear about the
Yeah.
increase, but it's essentially gonna net out.
Well, as of
Remember,
right
your
now.
basic allotment is
Yeah.
tier 1, that tier 1 portion of our funding, which is student-based, and then the tier 2 is our local tax effort. So they're pulling from the tax effort and moving it into the student funding element.
I don't
Increase the
fully
basic
understand.
allotment.
I'll have to ask some more questions
Yeah,
on that
we
later.
can visit
Thank
more
you.
about that, yeah.
I think we're anticipating $1 million
Less.
less the
Right.
second
Yeah.
year of the
Yeah.
biennium in additional funding.
That's, we're projected to.
All right.
And
Mike?
so I'll move on to programmatic needs. This is really, kind of falls into a couple of categories. It's either taking an older campus and coming in and creating a significant investment in renovation and trying to use the work that's been done over the past few years. We know a lot of the physical needs from our facilities assessment. We also went through, as required by TEA and by the state, to come up with your ed adequacy, and which creates your ed specs, your educational specifications. And so starting to invest in some of the older campuses to bring them up to better meet the needs of the types of instruction that we try to deliver in 2025, and not necessarily in the year when the campus was built, but also with an eye towards trying to be flexible with spaces that can be used for future needs as well. So one of the things that we see at some of our older campuses, especially as programs, special programs and our special education programming and services and some of those types of things have changed over the years, is having the dedicated spaces and being able to use a space as it's really intended, and have it designed so that it can be used for the purpose it needs to be. For instance, and that's not always, you just need more, it may be the only room available is a 900 square foot classroom that typically would have a classroom full of 25 fifth graders, but it's needing to be used as a resource classroom that only has 8 or 10 students in it. So it is having the right size spaces and also having them to a standard that meets what we have in our ed specs and what we've designed our newer schools to as well. So that's why I kind of group Lakewood and Sparta together. Lakewood and Sparta, Lakewood opened in 1986, Sparta opened in 1988, so we are closing in on the 40th anniversary of Lakewood Elementary, and soon after that will be the 40th anniversary of Sparta. If you study past bonds, these are campuses that have had additions given to them over time, but as a general feel, we felt like when we looked at our facilities conditions assessment and our facilities conditions index, These would be two that would be prime candidates to, they're large elementaries, they have high populations, and they support a lot of special programs, special programming needs. And so really what you would see in the project we're talking about here would be a complete campus-wide improvement on a full renovation of the interiors, and that would include finishes, replacement, light fixtures, having flexible spaces, whether that be for an art room or a science lab or a science room or a maker space, or to support students in our modified instruction, or students that are in self-contained classrooms or in intervention classrooms. Also looking at an investment in things around outdoor learning spaces and things like that as well. So it would be a full campus-wide assessment and design for upgrades, ADA compliance. And this is speaking to Riley's question earlier, kind of around the fire alarms. When you do go in and do major renovations, you're going to spend a lot of resources in upgrading restroom facilities and things like that to bring them up to current ADA compliance. And then electrical and technology systems, site work and furniture. Each of these two projects kind of have a unique site work. There's a drainage issue at Lakewood on the west side of the campus that kind of comes down in the playground area and by the bus drop-off or bus loop. And then at Sparta, that we know that we've got feedback multiple times over the years. There's a pickup and drop-off issue where all that traffic stacks in queues out on Sparta Road, and it creates really a traffic condition twice a day for every day of school that we have throughout the year. You will see that. Those are both in black, which means there has been a reduction in price from what we originally showed. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the things that we had discussed with our bond advisory group and with our citizens group, and we surveyed, was on Sparta is most of our elementary schools set at capacity of 800 students. Sparta's capacity is at 685, and there was a discussion of if we were going to go in and do extensive renovations, would it be wise to go ahead and add the extra capacity to bring it up to the same number and same capacity that the majority of our other, and the feedback on that was that the district had invested heavily in capacity. We feel like we're in a pretty good space for the next few years on capacity, and right now spending, I think it was around $4 to $4.4 million to add those classrooms to bring that capacity up. So that number's been pulled out of the Sparta number, as well as we have, this has been a process of gathering pricing, and I'll speak a little bit to pricing at the end if there's any questions, but gathering pricing that we're several months into this, and we were able to determine that we've seen a lot of projects that are either just starting construction or have just bid, and we were able to bring that cost per square foot on overall renovation. We were very conservative in our initial estimates. That number has come down a little bit based on information that we've seen regionally and statewide on what people are actually paying for or bidding for construction projects right now. So total difference was around $5 million total at Sparta, almost $5 million at Sparta, and about $3 million at Lakewood that has come off that price based on adjustment to the cost per square foot for renovations and taking away the increased capacity at Sparta. And for DAEP, similarly, we had a full modernization package for DAEP, and as we talked through with our groups and as we've studied it a little bit more, our recommendation at this point in time would be, I believe the initial package was a little over $2 million. We're talking now of really at DAEP doing a heavy upgrade of interior finishes. This is a campus that was built in 1974. It's been repurposed several times. But full interior finishes, which is flooring, painting, ceiling, LED lights, full ADA. We have some restroom issues there. We have elementary through high school students, male and female staff, and right now there's one male restroom, one female restroom, and one staff restroom with one toilet in it. So we do feel like there's a cost driver is anytime you're touching plumbing, it's a cost driver. So we have some ADA and just some usability issues in that small campus. We would want to address those. And then plumbing ADA compliance, plumbing and restroom, and then some furniture issues there as well. But that, an initial project of about 2.2 million. After we had more discussions, after we got feedback from our stakeholders, we reduced the scope on that project. The transportation facility, that is a facility that serves our entire district. It's one of our larger departments. There's over 130 staff members in transportation, a very large fleet of buses, almost 100 routes go out each day, both regular gen ed and special education students. We also have trip buses that go out pretty much every day of the week. And we have a lot of staff that parks on the streets. They park in the grass. So this would be a kind of a dual investment. It would be a site work, more parking, better parking, pave areas that aren't paved, reconfigure, tackle some drainage issues and things that we have on that site. And then also take a facility that was originally built primarily as office space, and it's a 25-year-old facility, upgrade that to where we would have the proper training spaces, multiple meeting spaces. They don't all meet together. You have your regular route drivers, your sped route drivers, your monitors, and then also call center, office space, meeting space, conference room, those types of things. So it's a very specific work they do there. They have a facility that was originally designed as a lot of office space and not so much big purpose, big meeting space. Belton Middle School, you can see, is the highest, or the largest project in the whole bond package. If you recall our 2022 bond, we did a very similar project at Lake Belton Middle School. We have a middle school. This is our last middle school that does not have a designated orchestra space, although they have an orchestra program. So the orchestra students rehearse and have basically their space is in a classroom. We do have a band hall, and that's where the Belton Middle School band rehearses and does their things. And then, so it would be to build a new band hall and use the existing band hall just like we did at Lake Belton Middle School as an orchestra space. And then that classroom could go back and be repurposed for instructional use. Also, Belton Middle School is the only middle school that does not have its own weight room. And so all of our 6th graders are in pre-athletic PE. They spend time in the weight room, as does all of our 7th and 8th graders that are in athletic program. And so right now they walk to Belton High School to use an older weight room. It's actually in the same room where the old Belton Tiger varsity football locker room was. So they have really nice equipment, but it's in an older building that was repurposed, and they lose instructional time and creates some supervision issues. You need to have coaches there ready to receive. You also need to have coaches getting them out of the locker room, and you also need coaches that can watch them during this. So it solves several problems, but to bring it to the same standard that our other middle schools have, which is a band hall, an orchestra hall, and a weight room, is really that's about over half of the cost of this project would be those 2 projects. And then since it is a building that is over 30 years old, also doing some of the same types of interior renovations to bring it up to the standards that we have today, and make sure that once again, it was built as an intermediate school just serving 5th and 6th grade students. Some of the cost driver here is renovations and additions of restrooms throughout the building as well. That's a common complaint that we hear when we talk to their staff and to families, is there's just not enough restrooms throughout the buildings.
Did we touch the BMS in the last bond? Did we do something with the gym or something there?
No, what we've done at BMS is we are gonna end up doing some HVAC work there.
Interior lighting.
And some interior lighting, are the 2 things that will be done there. So they were on some initial project lists, and then eventually, as the scope of the bond decreased, the Belton Middle School project came off, and it was discussed to put it on a future bond. The last ones I'll go quickly. We pulled. These are much smaller scope. We pulled the robotics arena. We had talked about repurposing the gym that we currently use for surplus. That's been on several different capital lists since 2015. Repurposing that as a district robotics arena that UTEC could also use for CTE instruction during the day. Once again, that was not one that we received the most positive feedback from either our advisory group, and it really centered around a really old facility that the price tag's not a lot, but a lot of that was investment in roof and the building envelope and HVAC, and then also for something that wouldn't impact tons of students every day, and with new tech's enrollment being a little bit static, those were some of the concerns we heard. Natatorium locker rooms, I will preface this by saying potentially these could be, these may have to end up in a separate proposition. We have our bond counsel who gets AG opinions and gives you, because it is on a natatorium, and a natatorium is one of the things that are specific, even though it's not new pool space or a new natatorium, if it's an addition, it could potentially have to go on a separate prop. And so, but one of the things that's been identified is those programs have grown. We need more locker room space, and we also need some designated restrooms and showers that are not shared with other patrons that are in the facility at the time when our kids are in there. So we have really one set of restrooms and showers, and everyone that uses that facility uses the same restrooms and showers. So this will be able to pull kids off and have our athletes have their own designated restroom shower space. BHS, baseball, softball, turf, and lights. That's one that was not in our original, but it was highly discussed and brought up by several members of the advisory committee. That was another issue of a programmatic need. We were able to afford, as an alternate, put in turf, baseball, softball at Lake Belton High School. At that time, it was not considered to do that at Belton High School here, and we've had that has been a request that's come often, and would like to consider allowing the community to weigh in on turf in the fields at baseball, softball. That was from our bond advisory committee, one that they brought in. And then the final project is a multi-use facility. It would be a phase 2 of CTE investment at Belton High School, but to minimize having to do separate projects, what we pitched to our advisory committee and to our community was also to include some meeting space. We know that meeting space is at a premium district-wide, and perhaps a meeting space that can be used not only by Belton ISD, but also by our community, because community meeting space is at a premium as well. We've heard that with multiple stakeholder groups. And doing it adjacent enough to Tiger Field that we could go ahead and include and handle one of our locker room issues, which is having a locker room for visiting teams or Lake Belton to use, and rolling it all into one facility. There's a natural connection between health sciences and some of the things that go on with EMS services and things in the stadium, and having the meeting space in an area where there's already parking. And so we wouldn't have to we could have a bigger meeting space, but not have to invest in parking or infrastructure, because that all already exists there as well.
Is that a whole new building? Or
It would be a new building, and it would be about 17,000 square feet total, 5 health science classrooms with a sim lab, a meeting space of around a little over 3,000 square feet, and then a locker room that would just accommodate a team on Friday.
I know we've got a couple of questions. I heard Manuel and I heard Chris.
Chris, go ahead.
So, really, the locker rooms for the natatorium we might have to pull off. Like, do we have any idea when we might know that?
After tonight, we'll reach back out. We had that discussion last week, and they were going to research it and see for
so,
sure.
I mean, related, right? The baseball, softball, turf. I mean, are we solid on that? Is
Yes.
okay to be here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why is it?
Because it's smaller than 1,000.
Under 1,000
under 1,000.
seats, and it's not an expansion of the program, and we will get final. I mean, our bond counsel will give us final determination on that, but they felt like in our initial meetings and going through our project list that the natatorium, because natatoriums are specifically spelled out, would have to go in a separate prop, and that improvements to the playing surface, if you're not expanding the facility, could probably go in the prop. They'll have final say on that for us, and they'll get an opinion if they're not sure. So.
Mike, I'm probably digressing a bit, but Jennifer had mentioned something about if you have some bond money, and then you can use it as needed. In other words,
Phasing it.
phasing it in. So like you mentioned that the HVAC systems may have 3 or 4 years left in them. So if we had bond money, could we defer that bond money until, like, get 3 or 4 more years out of the systems?
Yes.
We can do that then?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
And
could put a
that's true about
package
about anything, right?
You could. Your most immediate needs could go in the first issuance, your next layer of needs in a second issuance, and your third layer in a third issuance.
Does that cost the district during that time period? Is it costing the district money? No?
No, you don't pay interest on it until it's actually issued.
Right, okay.
So it's just sitting there waiting to be issued, not costing you anything.
Understood. Okay.
But there would still be issue costs, right? Would we still have issue costs?
So each time you issue, you would have additional issuance costs. So
Only when you issue.
Only
when you
yeah.
issue, that's paid out of the bond. But
Closing
yes,
costs.
in theory, 3 bonds cost more in issuance costs than 1.
Right.
But issuance costs are generally less than 1% of the cost of the total
Understood.
package. So.
Okay. All right. Now, looking at the softball, the turf, the baseball and softball, what's the cost for just the turf versus the lights?
I can pull
Do you
the
have any
breakdown
idea?
on that. Yeah, it's the main cost in that project would be turf, and I will tell you, there's a significant amount of contingency built into that price, because when the turf was, when the stadium was, the turf and track was redone at Belton High School, there were a lot of, the soil had issues, and they had to do some chemical injections to stabilize the soil, and had to go a little bit deeper than normal with select fill. So it actually drove the cost of that up, making an assumption that because of proximity that some similar soil conditions could exist, so building some contingency in. Sam may can speak to that more. I know initially, just if soil sites and everything were optimal, you're looking at about $2.5 million. So we built some contingency in for the unknowns in the design. And then the lights are approximately, I would say probably $300,000 or less on the lights. So the majority of that is the site work that would take, now once the site work's done, 10, 12, 15 years when you replace the turf, it's just pulling the old turf off, putting the new turf down. But on the initial install, you're going to have a lot more site work because of potential drainage issues and soil issues.
Also be bullpens, not both groups have bullpens and, for visitors, et cetera. And those visitors actually have to go out in the dark area back behind the field with softball. And then also drainage across the softball to get some drainage issues on the top of the
So I will say there's probably, of all the projects, that one has a great deal of contingency built in, because until you actually go in and do a design, there are some unknowns, and we don't want to get caught with unknowns not in our estimated project costs.
I just share the concern I have regarding some of this is this idea of chasing equity among the schools. So, we could do this forever. Like we could say, well, the high school on the north end has better tennis facilities. We need to renew Belton High School. Wait, and they also have turf. We need to get the same for Belton. But it could go like every which way it can happen with screens and the technology. This school just got screens, so we need to make it equitable. It can go for, this could be a never-ending thing, which, we always do want to be building and growing and improving, but I look at Lakewood especially up there, and I think, man, one of the amazing things is that campus is an A campus. They're just doing incredible things up there. But the quality of the building doesn't necessarily correlate with the instruction that's provided or the outcomes necessarily. I think sometimes citizens or the public or any of us can get that confused because we struggle in some other of the much newer campuses in the outcomes basically. So that's one of the things that I've struggled with is just this idea of chasing equity, and it could be a never-ending thing because you build a new school and then these schools don't have it, but it's just anyways, I just wanted to bring that up to you and the board. That's one of those things that concern me. Just it could be never ending chasing down this idea of equity among our schools.
You know, Riley, I see your point, you know, and I've thought about that over the years. You know, when you look at the south part of our district, southwest, and then you move north. The thing that I struggle with is trying to make sure that every child, whether the kid's going to Southwest versus going to Sparta or Lakewood, that they're having the same opportunity to learn just like anyone else. So I think when I make a decision, that's the thing that comes to my mind. I mean, that's my hope, is that if I'm making a decision, that I'm in line with that thought, as opposed to chasing equity, as opposed to giving the same opportunity to learn, just, you know, whether you're in the south or you're in the north, right?
Yeah.
So, but I see your point, and I don't think we'll ever be, in terms of facility versus one versus the other, because obviously when you look at aesthetics, you know, you go over to Hubbard Branch or you go to Burrell, and then you walk in one of the others, you know, it's like there's a big difference, right?
Right. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be able to make all facilities equal across the system. I mean, we would never be able to do that, but I do think it has been important in the district over time to ensure that students did have equitable opportunities. And so, you know, there's no way we can make every school shiny and look the way Hubbard looks right now. Absolutely. But as we have done things like starting to add art programs to schools or getting science labs versus a classroom, you know, those are the things that we have worked to try to build equity across the system, and particularly in schools that just didn't have that built in them originally. So I do think there's been an attempt to have equitable facilities with an understanding they'll never be equal. We'll never be able to do that or fund that simultaneously, at least.
And I think from what we see, the data, and there was talk around, are our spaces designed to meet the instruction and programming that we have? But it's also, to me, it made sense that it's an investment in a 40-year-old building that we would like to see used for up until it's 50 or 60 years old as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be taking up so much time here tonight, but this is obviously important to me. But you know, it was brought up. We talked about Miller Heights that was sold for, you know, just barely above what it was bought for. What was it, 50 to 60 years ago? That's part of my fear, is the long range of wondering what's going to happen with all that's changed with and not just public schools, but now private schools and the competition that's involved. You know, the growth, looking at the census, the surveys that have been done, and what they're projecting growth to be like 1% a year. In fact, possibly even losing a percent, if I remember right, in the next year, maybe two. So growing very little is what's being projected. So I worry about, you know, dumping a whole bunch of money into buildings that we don't know, you know, what the future holds.
Certainly our demographer is going to show and has shown that we are down about 1%, but does not look like that's going to stay the trajectory of Belton ISD over time. And so we do anticipate we will start growing again. We can get you, and we may have done that already, there's a big difference in an appraised value where someone goes in and actually assesses your facilities and assessing a value based on other things that have happened around the area. And so we can get the board information on, we actually had that property appraised, and so we can get you the actual appraised value of that property versus what was published as the value of that property. So we'll follow up with you on that. We're not prepared to talk about that today, but we have all that information and can get that to you. I would like to address one thing real quickly, and then we're 2 hours in, and we haven't even hit props B, C, and D. And we need you to have a conversation after that. So we're gonna, I think, take a break in just a second. But the district robotics, just want to share a concern about eliminating that. I mean, certainly we did not have a robotics program a couple of years ago, and our robotics programs are now going to nationals and internationals. We really do not have a space for that. We also have a problem. We have a building, and the building we were trying to solve two problems. We were trying to solve a robotics arena problem or opportunity. It's more of an opportunity than a problem. And we were trying to solve the fact that we have a building, and at break you might want to take a look at it, that is falling down around us. We are maintaining it. We can't tear it down, because if we tear it down, we lose six classrooms at New Tech. And so we need to keep those 6 classrooms at New Tech, and we are going to face having to address that building. We wanted to address it in a way that was functional, could be used. I think the problem in how we spoke about it, and I think that's contributing to this, certainly New Tech could use it. It was meant to be a shared space for the entire district around robotics, not a robotics location only for New Tech. And so I think how we spoke about that was part of the challenge with that. So I do have a concern with pulling that off. We felt like it was a good location. It was a good solution for a space that we are going to have to address. And so I just wanted to share, it had 2 purposes, not just robotics, and it certainly was never intended to only be New Tech. We did pull it off based on feedback that we've been receiving, but I wanted y'all to know kind of the why behind it making its way onto the list in the first place. And with that, you want to take a 10-minute break?
Yeah, why don't we, let's see, it is now
5 minutes.
7:02 p.m., and then we'll go off the record for about 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. Okay, we're now back on the record at 7:09 p.m.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move into Proposition B. And so the recommendation that was brought to the Bond Advisory Committee was to address the stadium issues at both stadiums. And so you see both on here. They both can be on one proposition. So Tiger Field renovation, you see what's included in the renovation at Tiger Field. So that includes, and I think Mike alluded to, or maybe I think Matt Gamble did actually on the survey, that would allow us to bring the band to the home side of the field. It would allow us to fix a lot of the seating and stands. The seats are broken, and we can't even find tools for the bolts for some of the brackets. They're falling out. We also have some ADA issues. If you think about it, a lot of stadiums, you have staff or families or students are able to sit, if they have mobility challenges, or actually able to sit towards the front of the stands, be able to watch the game with the traffic flowing behind them, whereas for us it flows in front of them. We have fencing challenges, a press box challenge. It's very small, has some elevator issues we're going to need to be able to address. And Sam could probably speak to some discus area and relocating shot put area, but we have a 30-year-old stadium for Tiger Field. And so it's in need of some support and some renovation. And we have the challenge at Bronco Field. Bronco Field was not originally built to be a competition stadium field. And so the items you see on the right-hand side under Lake Belton High School are the items that would bring that stadium up. As you can see, they don't have grandstands for visitors. We would have to expand the stands that are there. We would have to add concessions, restrooms, press box, some site work, and some additional parking and a video board, as well as adding a field house with locker rooms on the Broncos side. So this was the proposition that was presented to the committee. This has been based on, and board, many of you here before me, years of feedback on definitely needing to address the challenges at Tiger Field, but also addressing the stadium issues at Bronco, where Lake Belton High School band, their dance, cheer, football, all their JV, all of that could utilize the Lake Belton field. So they would have separate stadiums instead of one shared stadium at Tiger Field, as is currently the case. And so this is what was presented to the committee. We had mixed opinions on what's the right solution. This has been discussed for years in our community on should you do a standalone shared stadium, and that actually out of the last bond exploration committee process, that actually was the top solution, that you have a shared location not at Belton High School and not at Lake Belton High School. Now that was when we did the prioritization of the last bond. That did not make the last bond. There have been long-range facility discussions. There's been focus group discussions on this. And there's a lot of, I will tell you, this is the issue that I have gotten the most feedback on in the last year across the district is when are we going to address this issue? And so this was the recommendation that was presented both to the committee and to the community in both the survey and the face-to-face meeting. I probably missed stuff, Sam. Anything you'd like to add?
I would just, the locker room we're discussing at Bronco Field would just be for visitors and officials, be very minimalistic, nothing like where, and it also be utilized as a wrestling facility for Matt. Currently, they wrestle in the cafeteria, so it'd be a dual-use locker room that would be used year-round, similar to Belton High's CP edition.
Do we already have home locker rooms at Levis as well as?
So we're going to pause here for some discussion around this. There are lots of opinions about stadiums and solutions around the issues we specifically are dealing with in Belton ISD. And so just want to open it up to questions or comments specifically to the stadiums and a Prop B.
I'll take some heat on this with you. So the way that our district is, I guess, geographically positioned, Belton is right in the middle, in the north and south. I think it's a great location. We went and toured it the other day. The field has already been changed. The turf, insignia was removed to be specifically for the district rather than Lake Belton, than the Bronco field, it doesn't represent either, basically, the field. So some of the work has already been done there. I'm just assuming, this is a question, and then I guess I could continue, but I'm assuming with Bronco Field up on the north end of Lake Belton, the only time that it would actually be needed would be for a football game for capacity. Is there any time other than the football games when the stands would need more capacity?
If they wanted to try to do some sort of marching contest, they need the capacity. Also for community pep rallies type thing, they run into challenges when they do community events, sometimes about seating for capacity over there. But those would be the main times.
Okay, so for a cost of $21 million to upgrade that, I just think of it, amortizing that for 7 games a year, or 6, I don't know what it is, 6, 7 home games a year on average.
It'd be 5 to 6 depending on
5 to 6. So if you're amortizing that and knowing, the longevity, the life of this stuff, of the bleachers and things that we're already talking about at Tiger Field, that's a lot of money to be dumping into 5 to 6 games a year, possibly a pep rally per year or something like that. So, I have a ton of hesitancy on spending that kind of money on something that would only be used 5 to 6 times a year.
I will add also track meets. Seating for track meets, it'd be utilized on all track meets. It's about 5, 6 track meets a year where they would need they need a visitor side to sit students in, et cetera.
JV uses it.
JV uses it, varsity soccer uses it, soccer uses it.
Okay. But that's just, you know, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. I appreciate the work that's already been done to kind of, they have, Lake Belton already has their own locker room at the facility, right, at Tiger Field. So if Lake, as far as the football team and that, when they come down to play, they have their.
In that other building, yes, sir, where I showed you.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of work already to kind of accommodate and to make that work. So I would just have a hard time for what, 5 to 6, maybe 7, 8, 9 times, I don't know, a year, when it possibly could be used to spend that kind of money when we can just really use that center located, geographically located Tiger Field Stadium. That's all I'm saying.
I'd be remiss if I did not say that the students and parents and coaches have expressed some pretty serious concerns with what really was a makeshift locker room that was created not even within the stadium, but across the parking lot. They have to walk through the visitor side of that, the visitors team, to get to a space that, and I'm very appreciative of Sam and team for trying to retrofit that space for locker rooms for them, but I would not represent them well if I did not say they do not feel like those are adequate at all for them, and there's been safety concerns raised by the coaches on the locker room side of it.
Can I say something on that? I mean, we went there and did that tour, so it's probably 100 yards that they have to walk between that back gate and to the locker room. Even again, back to the $21 million, or if we're talking about building those locker rooms, which were, I believe it was 14, I can't remember, $14 million. Of course, it's a multi-use.
Sure.
But 2 security guards for each one of those 5 to 6 games. I wonder if that could just, you know, provide the safety and security rather than the millions of dollars that would be spent with this proposal.
Well, this was brought forward based on all of the multiple meetings and discussions in the 22 bond around stadiums and stadium challenges. And then it also is the conversation in the last bond advisory committee and just keeps being discussed in our community. There feels like a real dissatisfaction with our current solution from people that, I mean, for the last year, I've gotten that. Now, we might have differing opinions on the best solution within our community, but have had a tremendous amount of feedback that we need to do something. And so that's why this was the proposal brought forward, and would love to hear any other thoughts on this.
Well, I think with any stadium, that's what you're going to use. You're going to have potentially 7 or 8 games, depending on how many out of. So I'm not sure that would be the only factor that I would consider. Ever since I've been on this board, ever since we opened Lake Belton High School, if I'm at the field, some parent's going to say, "Why don't we have our own field? Why don't we have our own field?" You hear that repeatedly. So as a trustee, I don't think it's. Well, let me back up just a little bit. If we would have put a bond on the ballot, as trustees, we can't advocate one way or the other. All we do is vote to send the bond ballot out there, and then the voters decide, right? So the discussion here is not necessarily whether we would vote for the Bronco Field expansion, but I think it goes beyond that. We listen to our constituents, the folks in our areas, and I promise you there's folks that live in my area that are that want this badly, and there are folks that are on the other side, right? And then there are folks that are just like that survey told us. So if somebody wants it badly, why would I not listen to that person as I would listen to the other, and then let the voters decide what they want to do and let the process speak for itself? But I think we have to have these discussions because obviously a lot of works came out of it. And this just wasn't a product of the administration. This was a product of community members. This was a product of folks comprised of the community that say, hey, we want you to consider these kinds of things. So I don't know that, even if I was against it, if I said, look, I don't want to spend $21 million on the Bronco field. Even if I was against it, then I would not be listening to all my constituents. That's why we have the voting process. Let them decide. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't pass, then it didn't pass. So we've got to let the community decide things, and these are the kinds of things that the community's there for.
Brandon, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging issue.
Yes, it is.
It is.
I understand why when the new high school was built, what was done had to be done for budget or space constraints, but man, if I could go back and hand somebody a winning lottery ticket at that time to solve this initially. Because, and part of the challenge, I think, is we've got three potential solutions, right? One is just fix up Tiger Field, and Tiger Field is not really Tiger Field, it's the ISD field. From here on out, there's fix up both fields, make them both varsity level competitions, and a third option of just building an entirely new facility. To Mr. Alco's point, I put on the ballot whatever was recommended. I personally don't like the third option. If nothing else, it just creates more maintenance and operation expenditures in the future because, you know, as we had the point made tonight, like you don't just if you just end up abandoning facilities, or you pay money to maintain them, right? And so I hate to see a future where we just abandon Tiger Field because we now have a shared stadium. I agree that it's a hefty price tag. I don't think it's, you know, I think everybody wants to put things in perspective of like what it costs at their house. Like what does a house cost to build? I would say on this, compare it to Jerry World because we're not even close, right? Like Jerry World today would probably cost like $5 billion to build. It was $1 billion for the 20 years ago. So now, I mean, we're talking about in the terms of sports facilities and what it means. I don't think those numbers, they're not low, and I don't mean to mean them or say that it's not a big lift for the taxpayers, but we're not building, we'll throw Allen ISD under the bus. We're not building Allen ISD
Right.
Stadium, right? We're trying to build, you know, nice but not luxurious 5 to 6A competition fields for our 5 and 6A high schools, and so that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I think there is certainly an emotional and unquantifiable piece of having a home stadium that means something to me. Personally, it might not to the voters, and we'll let them decide that. But you know, the heart of that field or that stadium is often the heart of your campus. While it is only 5 or 6 home football games a year, it is where you play your JV games. It's where your soccer teams play. It's your track meets. And no, you don't. Probably not going to get 3,000 people at a track meet. I mean, so from a pure like capacity standpoint, you probably don't. But it still matters. I don't know how to quantify that, but I think it does matter when your stadium is on your campus, and that's kind of where you as an elementary school kid grow up going and dreaming out all the way through. So yes, it's not a low amount of money. I think it is both a better capital investment and less expensive than trying to do a third shared facility long term, and I think there's definitely a loud and passionate contingent that it does matter for to have their own stadium, and you know, we're talking both 5A, 6A high schools and will be for a long time. And not, so, okay, that was all right.
You know, there is something to be said about what happens on a Friday night lights. It's not just your football team, it's your cheerleaders and your dance and your band. It brings out the community. And it is something that people have a lot of passion and input around, because you're right. This is, I mean, the 4.5 years I've been on, this is definitely one of those topics that's talked about. And, you know, I mean, I think you said it so well. You know, I live on the Belton side. My kids go to the Belton, so I hear a lot of that feedback. But who am I to say that the voices of the other side, those opinions matter too, and I represent them as well. Because I read through a lot of these comments, and there's a lot of opinions of, I want the Tiger field, I want the Bronco field. Some said, don't do anything at all. So there's definitely varying opinions, but my opinion is we've got it. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road. We've got to do something. And I think Manuel's right too. We got to let the vote. We got to put something in front of them and let them decide. And to your point too, looking at Tiger Field line by line, those are really some critical needs. We're not trying to bring Tiger Field up to the Taj Mahal. A lot of that is around safety. And even in the Bronco field, I know people want to bring up the past. Well, we can't go back in the past. We've got to keep moving forward. And I even look at a lot of that, and we're not going to make Bronco Field the Taj Mahal either. We've got to let the voters decide.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually not my preferred option. But I do feel like we need to put it out in front of people and let them decide, right? There's been so much noise about the different options. One of the things that came up in the community meeting was actually a fourth option: break this into two and have Tiger Field on one and Bronco Field on the other. And the conversation that we had is that would be disastrous. So we can't put ourselves. The reason we can't entertain that, right, is you don't want to put yourself in a situation where Lake Belton votes no to Tiger Field, the Tigers vote no to Bronco Field, nothing goes through, and you're pitting now two pieces of your community absolutely against each other. I'm glad option 4 is not on the table. There's a lot of feels here, right? I mean, a lot of feelings here. And there are times today, like in the current setup, where BHS teams are displaced from their home field because Lake Belton is there playing, right? So, and I hear about that all the time too, right? So I'm hearing it on both sides, and so the fact that we've relabeled it, taken the B off and relabeled the end zones, we've almost stripped the home field feel from some of our teams, right? So the soccer teams, right? Well, okay, we have Wilson Kersey, right? So maybe, they do play at Tiger Field some, right? So they don't feel like they have a home team or a home field. Our track team, right? Doesn't feel like they have a home field necessarily. They don't see their logo and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of feelings to this, and I think we got to put it out to the voters and let the voters express what those feelings are. I could look at some of these things and say, do we need some of these things, right? Like, I don't know. I should maybe stop talking before I get myself in trouble. On the flip side of this, Lake Belton, there's almost nothing that you can do to Tiger Field to make Lake Belton feel like that's their home stadium. When you actually have to board buses and travel to your home stadium, it is not a home game. We run into situations where we have like student supervision issues, right? Like when you go to that stadium, you actually have to ride the bus back, right? Like you can't be released from there, right? Like there's whole transportation and parental sort of relation issues that happen. I don't know, it's kind of a mess, honestly, right now. And if you're gonna do it, if we say, hey, look, Tiger Field is the central stadium, clearly it's easy to change a name. Not so easy to remove a tiger. I'm not suggesting we should do that, but there's a pretty awesome tiger that's visible from that field that you would have to figure out some other way to get some other logo on that field in order for anybody to feel like it's even remotely theirs, right? Right, the tiger that's visible in the field house there, like you can't take that away, right? But in order to make that somebody else's home field, you got to figure out something. You would have to figure out something to do there, right? Otherwise, it's not your home field. I don't know. Again, this isn't my favorite solution, but actually, I think this is a solution that we should put forward and let people decide. So.
The question is, if we do nothing, if we say, well, we're gonna vote against putting the ball on the ballot.
Yeah.
What then? What happens to Tiger Field, the next 5 years? I don't know. I mean,
If we don't do any of these items.
we don't have the money.
Right.
We don't have the
Yeah,
money.
20 million is not coming out of O&M to do these.
No.
So what do we do?
We'll be looking for how we will refund ourselves for turf lights and resurfacing, and the video board will die. I mean, it is getting very close to its end of life. So we would have to look for a different solution because we wouldn't be able to afford a video board solution, and we would keep using it.
And even if this goes on to a proposition, if it doesn't pass, we're looking at having to do the same thing.
Right.
So.
Exactly. So I just felt like, and we felt like, based on just everything from the last 4 years, that it was important to bring forward a solution and to allow people to vote and tell us if we brought forward the right solution.
But what are the facts? The facts are that we've got things that need to be done, right? We've got some projected costs here. And what do? If we put it on the ballot and they vote against it, then the problem's not going to go away. It's just going to get worse. And that concerns me too. I don't like to see $40 million. I don't like to see those are huge numbers. But what Brandon said about perspective, I mean that does make sense to me. When I first got on this board and I saw what Lake Belton High School cost, I couldn't believe it. It's just like, and it's gone up exponentially because of inflation. 20% inflation. I mean, it's like the prices have doubled and tripled for some of these things that we're doing now. And unfortunately, it falls on the backs of the folks that live in our district, including us.
I feel like the only way to get something like this to pass is to treat both in some way, shape, or form. I think if you only is to treat both stadiums in some way, shape, or form. I think if you only put one on there, I don't think it passes. I think there's zero shot of it passing.
You mean one as in?
So if the proposition was only Tiger Field, I don't think there's any way that it passes. If the proposition is, only Tiger Field and then only Lake Belt, and only Bronco Field, like by themselves, I don't think either one of those passes. I think your only hope to get anything to pass is to actually do both, quite honestly.
Well, that's logical.
Yeah.
That's just logical.
And, is that the,
I mean, if I'm a parent and I have my kid playing on the Bronco football team and it's only on Tiger Field, I'm thinking, why am I going to vote for that? What about us?
Yeah.
And vice versa.
So let the people decide.
Or we have discussed, and we actually voted on it last meeting about the revenue bond.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we won't be doing anything if we
Right.
can go forward with this, that we are still planning on renovating. And just a reminder of our fifth goal, maximize our use of resources for both current priorities and plans for the future. And we've done well, I think, also with goal one, and strengthen and support the engagement of all stakeholders in the pursuit of the BISD vision. You know, with the bond committee meetings that you've had, and so yeah, difficult decisions. Yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
You know, and if we put it on the ballot, I mean, obviously, as I said earlier, we can't advocate one way or the other. We can't go out there and say, I need to pass this, you know, and go out there and campaign for it. We can't do that as trustees. So we've got to trust the process, let the voters decide. I mean, that's our system. That's our system of government.
Well, I'm going to show you two more propositions.
Oh, wow.
And then we're going to come back to this. So I want to jump to technology. This one's a little bit shorter. We originally had brought forward student devices, staff devices, as well as the interactive flat panels. Based on the feedback from the survey, there were a lot of questions on what really even is that. A lot of people don't understand what we're talking about with that. And so based on the feedback, we did remove that one that we're bringing forward to you. I will tell you, I have heartburn over this one. I have to compliment Shad. He and his team have worked really hard. Technology is in a very different place today than it was 5 years ago in Belton ISD, and from an infrastructure perspective, but also in terms of long-range planning. Shad and I have poured over documents that they've created in terms of, okay, what happens if no bond passes for technology? What do you do? You know, and how much do they cost versus if you were to lease them? And how much money would we have to find on the M&O side of our budget in order to maintain the student and staff devices that we have today? And I think we have over 19,000 devices that we have total in the district. I don't think that's counting interactive flat panels. I think that's just student and staff devices. Yes. So I don't love pulling the interactive panels off. I do feel like a lot of the comments were from a lack of understanding of what they are. They are a solution. They offer a lot of solutions for our teachers in the classroom. They're flexible tools as opposed to these ceiling-mounted projectors. They're expensive. The bulbs are expensive. It is a better technology. It lasts longer. The life cycle on these, I believe, is around 10 years for these devices. And so it is, and it was the solution that was landed on in our last bond process, that we would move towards getting rid of these and move towards the interactive flat panels. So I am worried about pulling it off, because what we are saying is, well, we started to go down the road of replacement of these resources in schools, and we would be halting that or pulling that into the M&O side. And Chad, will you remind me how much it would be annually if we were to lease those?
Leasing the interactive flat panel is a little harder.
We would still have to purchase.
We still have to purchase them.
Okay.
Because of the longevity of them, they can't get the money out of them when they go to resell them later on. You know, with our student staff devices, if we lease those at the end of 4 years, they can turn around and sell those, and they still get pretty good, you know, money for that. But the interactive flat panels last so long that they'll do it, but you don't get as good a deal.
Okay.
What's one of them cost?
Roughly around $3,500 for an interactive flat panel with the cart. And we did the breakdown on it, like looking at those over the projectors. Over a 10-year period, you're talking maybe $3,000 for the projector, but the difference is you're not paying the man hours for technicians to go clean those out, or to change light bulbs, or to do all those things, and you're also losing the flexibility of those. You know, the teacher's not tied to the front of the classroom, and you can also take them out and use them in meeting spaces out in the hallways, or you can use them for community meetings or things like that.
And they're also interactive, so our kids can actually
Yes.
utilize them. They're touch screen. We've seen really good implementation of them as resources in classrooms in our new schools, as well as some of our other schools that have started receiving some of these. And so I don't love that that's, you know, shaded in gray to suggest we're pulling it off, but if we needed to get this proposition total dollar amount, then we would recommend doing the devices. and we would look to other ways we can address the interactive flat panels.
How long do they last?
About 10 years.
I think it'd be like, didn't we figure $300,000
A year, like
a
something
year
like that,
that
yeah.
we would have to pull out and add to technology to be able to do that.
One of the other benefits of those too is they're brighter. They don't have the glare issue that you have in classrooms. But you know, with the windows and all of the things, I mean, there's a ton of benefits of those over the projectors.
Any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question on student devices and the life cycle of those.
Mhm.
So could you explain how we're doing it right now? Like, are we replacing them every 6th year or whatever the life cycle is, kind of broadly, or are we waiting till some of them burn out and then replacing them?
Every 4 years is what we're doing our student devices. And then by doing that, like we'll pick like secondary, we'll go 1 year, and then high school will go 1 year, then middle school, then elementary. That's the way we've been doing those since 2022.
What would be the likely consequences if we tried to extend them to their literal life?
I will tell you, our elementary devices that we just refreshed this summer, they were 5 years old.
Around year 5.
Yeah, and the problem with that is the batteries start to die, the wear and tear on the devices is more, your repair costs are higher, the time that your technicians are spending on repairing those devices, all those costs are unseen in that.
Your kid not having a device while it's being
Yeah.
repaired,
I mean,
or,
Jennifer, not to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot. Would you be able to explain, because the question that did come up through the process on technology is, the question was, so you're going to go out for a 30-year bond for a device that has a 5-year life cycle. So can you talk about how that's actually not the case when we do our bonds?
Right, so we do sell one bond, but we're required by IRS rules to amortize projects over their useful life. So even if you wanted to do that, you can't legally do that. So within the bond itself, we'll have multiple purposes for the different projects, the different propositions, and then the technology in particular, vehicles would be the same because they have a shorter useful life. Anything with a shorter useful life than the 30 years that we intend to amortize it over will have to have a separate purpose and be fully amortized within that period of time. So the debt service will look a little lumpy. It'll be more principal being paid off in the short end of it to pay off those devices earlier. But by selling it as one bond, we save on those issuance costs by combining it with the larger projects so that overall the district is saving money. You could issue it as a separate proposition to satisfy people who are concerned about it, but there's no need to do it that way. We're not legally allowed to do anything else.
Are peer districts kind of dependent, like, it seems like this isn't legal.
No, you asked me to.
Are peer districts kind of dependent on bonds to cover these like we've been, versus maintenance?
It's common to see devices in bonds. I mean, different districts are in different positions. I do suspect that COVID exponentially increased devices across school districts and probably made this more challenging. Other school districts have just always leased, and so perhaps they pulled the lease into their M&O. So I think you see it both ways, depending on probably the size of the district and whatever their one-to-one solution was for their district.
Can I digress for just a moment, Jennifer, so just ask her a question?
Yes.
Okay. And you've come and spoken to us over the course of several years. You've come to us often, right?
It's 20 years at this point.
Right.
That's a date myself.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you gave a compliment, right? And you said that we've managed the bond debt pretty well, and that we've paid it down, you know, when we have extra money. So there's no penalty for paying it down early, right?
Well, we generally have a 10-year option in the first 10 years of, so 30-year bond, the first 10 years are usually restricted. You can't pay those off. After year 10, you can pay it off.
Right.
And so the district has routinely paid off debt early, not refinancing for savings, but simply actually defeasances where you have extra cash and you just pay it off.
while there is a 30-year amortization, we can start paying it off after the first 10 years.
Yeah, it's
right?
unusual for
Right.
them to go the full
And
30.
you've also mentioned in other meetings that when we talk about the fairness to the folks that are currently paying it, like you've got a kid in high school and you're going to be, paying taxes for 4 years if you're living here or whatever. The amortization schedule of 20 years or whatever it may be, that, puts it on the backs of the folks that are using the facilities at the time, right? Can you speak on that?
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't seem disingenuous because I'm in the bond business, but
Right.
I do believe it. Unlike a home where there's one family who, we always like to use the example of a home mortgage. Well, that's a different analogy. In this case, because there's multiple generations of taxpayers who use these facilities, who benefit from these facilities, not one single family like the home. By using debt to finance it, you are then spreading out that burden of paying for it over multiple generations of taxpayers. So even if you had cash to pay for it, which would be a great thing, unfortunately districts generally don't. But even if you did, that would be a single year of taxpayers paying for something. By paying it out over 30 years and closer to the useful life of the asset, whatever that useful life may be, you've grown at Belton ISD, because I looked it up, you've grown 100% in your ADA over the past 20 years. So it's doubled. So if you were to build all these facilities with cash, over a couple of years, the people who are here now wouldn't have paid for them. So they'd be getting the benefit without the cost. So it helps to lessen the burden on current taxpayers and let growth pay for itself by using debt to pay for it. Yes, there's interest associated with it. Historically, interest rates have been very low. They're higher than they have been. But there for a while, we were borrowing for you guys at 3%, right? So now it's closer to 5, and we think it's crazy, but it's still relatively inexpensive when you think about it that way. So yes, by stretching it out over a period of time that matches the life of the asset, all those generations of taxpayers who benefit, who send their kids, who may not even think about living in Belton yet, but they might in 10 years, they will help to pay for that facility. So it's not just the current taxpayers who are funding the growth, it's the growth that's paying for itself. So there is that fairness, or to use the term equity that's been spoken about in a different context, that equity argument as well.
Right, okay, all right. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
I'm going to jump to the wrong direction. I'm going to jump to Swim Center. And so as I shared with you in the beginning, I did not originally bring a recommendation for addressing Swim Center with this particular bond advisory committee for a couple of reasons. We have been putting money into the Swim Center. The lining of the pool had been replaced. The outer membrane bubble had been replaced. Board, you've been through various board actions. We're going to be replacing the HVAC system at the Swim Center. And there's also been ongoing conversation behind the scenes to try to find other entities that would partner with us in the actual construction of an auditorium. And so we absolutely recognize that pool space is an issue. That's one of the problems that we know we're trying to solve in trying to find partners to build an auditorium for us and with us. Pool space is an issue, as well as the repairs that we've been doing in there. The ventilation system was an issue, and that's why that's being replaced, or the HVAC system. There is a desire to grow this program. Certainly, we have a lot of stakeholders who believe it would grow if we could increase the capacity. While it has a bubble membrane, we've put some safety features in place to address what we do if winds get above a certain level. We're not able to have students actually in there because of the type of bubble membrane that's over that facility. So it wasn't that we didn't think there was a need. We know there's a need. We know there's a pool space issue. And we know that membrane is not, it will have a finite life to it as well. But we were working behind the scenes on looking for potential partnerships. But out of our bond advisory committee, There were enough voices that we needed to bring this forward, and so it was added. I don't have the Vesely survey because it wasn't originally coming forward, so we did not survey on that particular item. But we did take this to our community face-to-face meeting that we held, as well as receive survey data back on this one. And actually, I'm showing you both options. The one that the majority of respondents out of that 193 people who responded to the surveys, the majority were in favor of D2. While they weren't voting, that was, we were asking, would you be more in favor of this or this, and then share with us your questions, and I'll show you the data in just a second. I think it's on a future slide. The majority came back asking for D2 as an option. Yeah. And so I want to stop for a minute and get you to ask questions, see what we can answer on Swim Center.
Why are these not included in C, in Proposition C? Because they're also athletics, sports.
Oh, it has to be, natatoriums have been identified as something that has to be its own proposition. So, that's a great question. A lot of people have said, why can't it just be about athletics, and that's all Prop B, but we're required to separate those now.
Even though it's athletics?
Even though it's athletics. Natatorium has to be separate, stadiums have to be separate, and facilities of a certain size, number of seating capacity.
I mentioned earlier that there are folks, if you look at A, B, C, and D and whatever, there are folks that are very passionate on both sides. But there are folks that are especially passionate about this swim stuff. Is that right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, they believe it's not only an ability to grow a swim program, but that it's also a significant impact to the community as a whole. We do, we have senior citizens that come in and use our facilities. We have, we offer swim lessons, and we sell out, and could absolutely offer more. And some of the feedback is that's a benefit to the entire community. The more kids know how to swim, the safer children are, particularly in an area that has lakes. And so, I think just from a competitive perspective, being able to have a 50-meter stretch pool, being able to offer swim lessons year-round, being able to bring in our own elementary students for water safety. So, yes, there is a lot of passion and a lot of interest in growing this and addressing this as well.
I've seen community members asking about revenue, and they seem to think that revenue could be a big thing, whether it be the swim center or football or whatever it might be. As I've kind of run numbers just in my head, it seems like even to pay off a $3 million bond, it could take 10 years. And we're talking 16 to 24. How much revenue does something like a swim center bring in?
I'm hoping Sam can speak more specifically to what we're currently bringing in, because because we have one of the largest swim programs and swim clubs, the money they've been able to generate has helped tremendously in putting money even back into the swim center to do some of the maintenance and some of the improvements that we have made.
I can't give you a specific number, but I will say this, from the natatorium focus group that we also did, part of the long-range facility planning team, we went and talked to lots of different natatoriums. The ability to do year-long swim lessons is going to be your biggest revenue driver, because people want their kids to learn how to swim. And so the facilities that can offer year-round swim lessons, that's the biggest revenue driver, whether it's club teams in the Austin area, Nitro, the biggest revenue driver is going to be the ability to operate swim lessons year-round, which we currently only operate them in the summer because of school time and space issues. I can get you more specific revenue numbers.
I guess what I hope that the public can understand is it's really relatively insignificant. At least that's what it seemed like. Because if we're talking, when we're talking like the revenue bond, for example, isn't it going to take like 10 years? And that's taking from, I would imagine, all of the, plays, and all of the revenue that we're bringing in the district to pay that off, basically.
How long did it take to do our last revenue?
It was a 10-year, and it came specifically from athletic.
Just
Okay.
athletics?
Right.
So that would be including swimming?
No,
No.
I don't think
No.
swim was included in that, no.
On the revenue part, I will say that some of the natatoriums that run their own club that are able to offer swim lessons year round, the biggest thing they gave input to us was to get to net zero was their goal on their yearly operating fees of operating the facility. They didn't always get there, but that was their goal.
Thank you.
And that's important, just that there is not a revenue path for the natatorium to pay for itself. And we would be lucky if the gate fees somehow offset the additional M&A costs. So while they're not zero, again, it's perspective on trying to pay down $20 million of debt. It's not going to come from gate fees or costs.
You know, when we were talking about, the other slide, we were talking about the devices and the cost of that. And Riley, you asked a question the other day in our board meeting, and I think Frank answered it. You were talking about, hey, why does this cost so much? Remember that? Right?
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was, I wondered if it was student devices, and then he explained that we needed a lot higher.
Yeah.
Right, right. So, and I had the same sentiments when I first started to see what the cost of these devices were, in our district and the technology and how expensive that is. But Dr. Golden, one of the things that we always incorporate into anything that we do is how it's going to impact student outcomes. How's it going to impact the classroom? Can you speak for a moment on, we're looking at this whole package, how in your mind that is going to impact the classroom?
You were talking about all
Just
of
anything,
these,
just in general,
like
yeah.
all of that.
All of that, yeah.
Well, certainly your Prop A impacts, every single campus in Belton ISD would be impacted if all of this were to move forward. And I think, from a safety and security perspective, you're hitting pretty much every campus. And so whether you're talking about the safety and security issues that we've brought up already in Prop A, or you're talking about spaces specifically designed, we have special needs students that are not having the same classroom experiences in some campuses as others, just because those programs didn't exist years ago. And so I would say there's a significant student impact in all of this. It's hard to quantify the high school, and I think, Brendan, you did a really good job of that. I certainly, our students and our superintendent student advisory students, particularly on the Lake Belton side, were able to articulate their desire to be at their home campus. That impacts not just your football band, cheer, dance, choir, but your spectators and wanting to be a part of that school culture. And so, the devices touch every student, every staff member. That's an important, if you think about it, became the pencil of our time, Technology is an essential tool in our world and beyond school, and so it touches every student, every staff member on that technology side. And then the swim center, we have students that take advantage of our athletic programs, our fine arts programs. It engages students in their school community. We have incredibly talented students on the swim side. We have students that are probably, if they're not at it, they probably are right there at the Olympian level swimming. And so, it has given our students a well-rounded educational opportunity and experiences in Belton. And I do think those are some of the reasons why people choose Belton ISD, is for our robust CTE programs that are for our fine arts and swim athletic programs. Those are reasons why I think people choose to come here, and I think that's contributed to the growth. So, it would be hard for me to say any of this doesn't touch our children and our staff.
Riley, you mentioned you did the tour of Tiger Field, and you mentioned that at the meeting the other day, and you indicated how impressed you were about how many kids were actually using it that you hadn't seen before, right? So, and then going to Aaron's point about how it impacts the band, the cheerleaders, and the number of students. There's a huge part of the sector of the student population that when there's a game at Tiger Field, a lot of them are there, right? So it's not just the fact that we're having 6 or 7 games there. It's the interaction that these kids have amongst themselves whenever the community comes together at these games. So I think it has a significant impact just beyond that Friday night, right? I don't know. That's just a thought about that.
Can I stop us from getting out on time? And go back to the.
Can you what?
Stop us from getting out on time.
Oh, we weren't gonna get out on time.
On the swim center and going to to throw another wrinkle in it, I mean, did we discuss the option of just adding the locker rooms and stabilizing the structure? Like, do we know what it costs? Because to our earlier point about trying to make every campus equal, are we setting ourselves up to be building a $25 million, $50 million, whatever swim facility at Lake Belton in 5 years or 10 years? Well, we're saying no, but I mean, no was the answer when we did one football season. I mean,
Do we have a pricing on the outer, just creating a permanent structure on the, when you talk about remove the bubble enclosure?
8 million.
8 million.
And then the locker rooms were
About
2.5 million.
Yeah, 2.2, 2.4, so around 10 million, 10 to 10 to 10.4 million.
Mike, didn't we have a significant cost with the current swim center? Something about the bubble? What did we have?
We replaced the outer membrane. It had several tears.
And
It
what did
was
that
end
end
of
up-
life and $176,000.
But there was something that was like super expensive. I don't know.
The pool liner was about 360.
Right, okay.
Where the current ventilation system is almost $1 million.
That's the most, it's 850 something
Right,
thousand.
yeah.
Brenda, did you finish your thought? Was there something you were gonna add to
That was just it, like, so is this gonna be our district facility? Or are we?
If we were to do these things?
Yes.
The bottom line is it doesn't meet our needs, right? Like, if you were to, sir, you talk about take the 50-meter stretch out and then like just take the facility as it is today, just put a better roof on it and upgrade the restrooms. That's what I heard your suggestion.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the reality is that doesn't meet the needs of the swim program to do that. It doesn't meet it from a capacity standpoint. And it doesn't meet it, like, it barely supports 2 schools today. Well, yeah, well, I would argue it barely supports 2 and it's 43, but, I mean, we're massively underserved by pool space in our community, like massively underserved. And so our community does need a facility to do these things. So I'm going to avoid getting into my background too much, but I do have a pretty significant aquatics background, and like, I would want to see a 50-meter pool, movable bulkheads, potentially movable floor, dive well, training, heated therapy pool, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's the school, like, that is a community resource that I don't think the school provides, right? Like, I think that is a multi-entity endeavor that we could absolutely take advantage of. We could take advantage of it, like all of our high schools, like crying out loud, like Temple High School, like the high schools around. We would attract meets from all over the place to a facility like that. Even if we do the 50-meter stretch on here, we are still going to be pretty limited into what we can do, right? And so that's my heartburn. Like, my heartburn is like, we need this so desperately, but is this the right answer to meet the need, right? Like, I'm so torn up over that. Because if we are able to somehow make a multi-entity facility happen, what happens to the swim center, right? I mean, do we continue to use it? Do we shut it down? Like, I don't know. But they don't make money right? Like, if you barely, like, your goal is to break even, like, their money sinks. And so I'm torn up, right? Because I know the benefit that this brings, and I don't know if this is the right long-term solution for the community. Is this a good, like, short to medium-term solution? Yeah, maybe, right? But is that the right price tag for a short to medium-term solution? I don't know. I'm torn, honestly. So.
Just to your point about the structure, if we did just do the structure only, we'd have to shut down the swim program for about a year. We really don't have another place to go. If they were putting a permanent structure over top, that was all we were doing.
Can I say something on that last one? So, okay, look at this screen. 4 themes are identical, and then it appears, at least, that the only difference is putting that roof on. When I was in that last meeting, a community member pointed out something to the effect of, hey, isn't that, it sounds like that was about $200,000 to replace. I don't know how often we're replacing that, but we're talking $7 million difference to put a roof over it instead of just using what we currently have of that bubble. So is it really that bad with the hailstorms that we have right now, that seem to be damaging roofs over and over again? Would it be damaging that roof anyways also? It'd probably be a metal roof, I'm guessing, so probably not. But, that $7 million, is that really worth it? That's a question that I think we should consider.
Well, the safety of that membrane had been studied in the past. Past administrators, I think, had asked for there to be an assessment of that. And there's a wind speed at which we would not keep students in that. And I don't, do you recall the cutoff? There's a cutoff, a threshold that had been set for that with a warning system put in place. Now, a lot of our swim families are not satisfied with that solution and are concerned with it. The safety of a bubble membrane, is that fair? I think that's been feedback that we've received. And so that's why that came up. It's just long-term, is that the safest solution? It has been deemed safe, but you have to evacuate kids out if the winds get up to a certain speed.
On average, how many times a year does that actually happen?
I'm hoping Sam's looking at us like he knows that.
I mean, it's gotta be.
Once a year?
Yeah, it's gotta be well over 50 miles per hour at that one particular facility, so.
And the HVAC work that we just did HVAC work, right?
No,
It's
the
being
equipment's
installed.
ordered, we picked a vendor to install, we're just waiting on the equipment to arrive.
Would that same system be usable if we did V2 for the equipment truck on?
Steve, would the HVAC investment that we're making would still be usable if we did option D2?
So to Brandon's point, we are not going to get out on time. And so really we're to the conversation, and one of the outcomes for tonight, a couple of outcomes for tonight, is really needing to hear your thoughts on these various projects. Are we missing something? Are there things that you have concerns over? You have not called for a bond. Really three questions are most important. Are we on the right track? Do we need to stop where we are? We commissioned a bond advisory committee. These are the potential propositions that we're presenting to you. So do we move forward? If so, are we moving forward in November? And tolerance level 4, we need to circle back to bond capacity and cost of bond. So I'd love to just hear your general thoughts.
A couple light topics there.
Very heavy topics.
All right, so when we talk about bond capacity, so even though the tax rate didn't change last time, the fact that the tax rate didn't change caused more problems than if the tax rate would have changed. All right, and so I'm actually more in favor, if we're going to do something, make the change. right? Like, make a change in the rate, like, even if it's a half a penny, right? Like, make a change, and we just own the change, and take that piece of the argument out, right? Like, because, like, we
Actually,
spent.
it went down.
Yeah, I mean, we spent so many cycles around, like, arguing with people around the fact that the ballot says, you know, it's a tax change, right? But it's like the tax rate wasn't going. We were talking about tax rates. Like, nobody could understand it. I think it's too difficult and too charged of an issue to go out for a bond with no change. I don't know. Like, that's one argument we don't need to have. Just own the fact that, yeah, we're going out for a bond, we're asking you for money, and it's going to change a little bit. And that's the argument, right? So, honestly, there's some things that I might tweak in some of these. I don't know that we need to get into that now, but I mean, I know we're not voting. We can't vote. If I had to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, like I could give a thumbs up. Like I do think we should move forward with some of this. I don't know if that's what you were asking anymore, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our next step, so just to share with you next step, if walking out of tonight feeling like might not be there quite yet, but moving in the right direction, then we have a date by which we have to do a special called board meeting should the board choose to call a bond. And so would need to walk out with a pretty good sense of if there are some pieces to it that there's real heartburn over, I need to be able to I need to know what some of those are, but also I need to get a sense of size of a total bond package so that as we are making some of those tweaks, we're in the ballpark of what the board is comfortable with in terms of going out for a bond. So I was going to go back to Jennifer's slide real quick. Oh. So Chris,
I say go for a penny.
Okay.
I don't know that that's what you're asking, but I go for a penny.
If I'm doing the math right, just in the 4 props that y'all have brought to us tonight, that's equaling 194.9 million?
Yeah. The only option, if you were to do them as they are currently being presented to you this evening, would be to do the 200 million, but do it in a phased process. So it would be that last bullet that Jennifer talked about. So you would go, you could issue an initial around 100 million, I think is what Jennifer talked about, and then wait a couple of years and then go out for the additional dollars. So you could do that over time. But you could do, Jennifer, am I right, you could do that 4th bullet without an increase to the tax rate?
That was correct, yes.
Okay.
And we're back to.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of heartburn over the dollar and the pennies right now because we know that the tax base changes every year. We're going to have potentially 4 different propositions. They might not all be successful. So, as far as trying to whittle stuff down to fit that, and then we don't know what happens at the ballot box or what happens with rates or property values. I'd just ask the voters and, take the lumps if we have to say, yeah, we're going to do it. We're just going to have to wait a year or 18 months to actually start that project or fund that project. And some of these might be, we'll probably have a bunch of multi-year construction projects in there, but some will take some time. With the larger ones like that were proposed at elementary. If the district, going back to one of the things that was taken out, if the district robotics isn't what the community wanted, I don't want to just end run it, but do we need to put something in there just to stabilize the structure or here at New Tech for that gym to?
Yeah, we would need to come up with a solution. Again, we were looking for where we would actually use that, use that location. But yes, we could get pricing on what do we need to do to stabilize it.
Okay.
And could add that into it. I mean, right now, we're currently using it as a storage space for surplus furniture, things like that.
And you said option D2, which is the covering of the stadium, that's gonna take our current swim center offline for a year? So we would add and then
I think you would
take the
add.
current off?
Yeah.
Cover that.
I'm hoping Sam's shaking his head yes.
Good.
Okay, good. Good
Yes,
sign.
we would build the new and then start, so we still have full space to utilize.
Yeah.
So when you say 2026, that'd be January. The fourth bullet point,
Yes, sir.
right?
In this option, you can issue early 2026.
Linda, when you had the slide up there with, had the robotics program and it had the turf and lights,
Yes.
my first thought was, I mean, I'm a sports guy too, and I'd love, see kids playing on turf and whatnot, but if we didn't do the turf, why couldn't we do the robotics? If most of the cost has to do with the turf, we can replace lights and keep the robotics in there.
I was about to suggest the same thing.
If we were, in order to get the total dollar amount down.
Right, in order to get the total dollar.
Meaning keep the robotics piece in, but eliminate turf.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my question for coaches, what's the disadvantage of just keeping grass?
So, as
Cost
far
wise.
as cost-wise,
Could do
I mean, it's just yearly maintenance,
Yeah.
watering, winterizing, aerating, fixing sprinkler system, et cetera. And then, anytime you have severe bad weather, the disadvantage of you can't get out there.
Yeah.
The softball does have a drainage problem, so every time it rains
It does.
hard, it does wash out the infield.
Yeah.
And so we have to bring in more select fill each time, and they have to spend
I see.
multiple hours, because when it rains hard, you will see like a river running across it. Just the way that place has been laid out and planned.
Right.
Aaron, did you?
No, I would just have some angst about pulling the turf for the baseball and softball, because I didn't realize that that has been a big concern to many
Yeah.
families as well.
The-
And I didn't realize that, not that it wasn't just an equity kind of issue, but it really does cause some major issues that they currently have. I have some concern about taking that off of baseball and softball.
So what's challenging about this, and thankful, Jennifer, for you doing it, but, to your point, Chris, about even raising it 1/10 of a cent, you can get to your all of your packages, if they pass, kind of to your point, just because you put them before voters doesn't mean that they will pass. You can do that at the 200 million and not touch your tax rate. Or if it's important to deal with that conflict in that language on the ballot to go up, then, and if we're only gonna do a cent, then we need to hone back those projects.
Like a 1/10 of a cent and go to 200 million. Yeah. Like, I feel like the numbers gotta go up, right? Like, it was
That's feedback.
so
we've been
much
given.
effort was wasted. So much effort was wasted last time because of that particular issue. Like, even if it goes up by 1/10 of a cent, right? Like,
That's feedback I've been given.
yeah.
The verbiage is gonna be the same.
Right.
It's gonna-
The verbiage is gonna be the same, so at least let's own it. The rate's gonna go up, and it's gonna go up by 1/10 of a cent. Yeah.
Well, there's plenty in, I'm sorry. Reed.
No, go ahead.
There's a lot of concerns that I have, that some of these, I think you all can kind of gather that from where I'm at. So I wish, not just I wish, I think we could do better at maximizing our resources. And I could bring up 5 or 10 or 15 of them, but I think we've been here for quite a while. Maybe I'll type something up and send it to you with some of those ideas, but, yeah.
So Riley, you would be for,
I would be for even less than the 149. I think we're overdoing it on many projects.
I other thoughts?
So Ronald, you're saying you're not necessarily against putting the bond on the ballot, but you have concerns about some of the items on it that maybe shouldn't be on there.
No,
Is that?
what I'm saying is that I think I would have a hard time supporting letting this go through us, or at least me personally, right? That I wouldn't support it at this point because I think we need to do better on some of these projects. There's just, I could throw 3 or 4 of them out. You know, the softball field I brought up for equity. We all have, I guess, we're all gonna have our different points. And there's maintenance costs either way, right? We're replacing the turf on Tiger Field, but just, you know, for those equity reasons and that kind of thing, both of them require maintenance. The grass does, as does the turf. The new locker room, you know, it's, like I said, it's about 100 yards. And do we really need to ask our taxpayers to spend $14 million when, what if we just had a couple of security guards for the visiting team and you know, 6 games a year? The natatorium, I expressed some of the concerns on the roof. You know, if we can get by and have to replace it I don't know how often we're having to replace that bubble wrap every 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I was just looking at that today. I think it was probably around 14 years or so whenever it was replaced. So probably should have been at about 12. We were having some significant leaks and things when we finally, but I think it's probably 12 to 13, 14 year lifespan from what we've seen.
So, and another roof is gonna, you know, that cost $7 million is going to have damage along in those years and depreciate as well. So yeah, there's more, but that's kind of those minor to your question. Yeah, there's plenty of those concerns that I have that I think we could do better at. Yeah.
To that point, right, we did have a budget advisory, or a bond advisory committee, right? The panel of our peers, right, who put together the contents of this, right? So.
Yeah, I've been a part of 4 of the last 5 of those.
Yeah.
What I would say to that is we go in and we offer which one, option 1, 2, or 3, but what about option 4? And that's kind of what I'm presenting tonight. Option 4 is, hey, what if we didn't build a facility, a locker room for the opposing team that will be used 6 to 12 games a year, since we have 2 different teams using it, and use 2 security guards instead, you know?
I feel like, Riley, that would have come out through these 3 bond advisory committee meetings. You know, these individuals asked lots of questions. They've been deeply involved in whether it was long-range facility planning, past bond work, you know, heavily involved and asked a lot of questions. I mean, that's how the natatorium or the swim center solution even came to be. It wasn't originally what was brought forward. And so, you know, I feel like these individuals had every meeting opportunity to ask questions, poke holes in it. What's missing? What would you pull off? You know, and so I do feel like this represents a lot of stakeholders. We, you know, worked to make sure that committee represented all aspects of our district, so that there wasn't just one portion of the district covered by that. Many of you put additional members on that committee, and so I just would feel remiss if I didn't say I feel like this, you know, we engaged a lot of people. They gave it good thought. Their recommendation has informed what we brought to y'all this evening, and we just appreciate your consideration of their work and the needs that have been identified through our various assessments and the work that's been done with long range.
Many of those folks are also very conservative business people.
And also people that they are swim parents. They are softball parents. I'm not a softball parent. I'm not a swim parent, but their input. I mean, it's important to listen. And so I think I think to the point about the equity that I have noticed over the last few years, and this is just my opinion, is when we do or we have more at certain areas of the district, what sometimes and is happening is if I'm at a school where I see that dance program thriving, I'm going to transfer. We're going to move over. Well, then what happens to those programs? Because they don't have some of that program equity that's been invested in. Yes, it's a new school, so it is. There's lots of new things. But that's a concern I have, is that if we don't at least try to build some equity between programs and schools, some of those schools are losing students because they're going to those places. And I do appreciate that Dr. Golden and the team have been really intentional about trying to find ways that we can, like at South Belton Middle School, they've got some certain electives that some of the others don't. So it's a way to invite or encourage students to come. I have a little bit of angst that we do nothing and not try to at least even the standards or the ball field, if you will, no pun intended, because the turf, it's not just that it's what the North has, it's causing issues at Belton High School for the softball and the baseball. And those parents and coaches, their voices matter, and I think we just need to have, I mean, and I agree that it's a cycle that we're just gonna keep chasing.
Is there a range, Erin, that you would be more comfortable with if looking, I'm not asking you to pick one. Nobody's voting, but just asking for a sense, a pulse of the board of penny tax rate increase, larger capacity without tax rate. You know, we've got a variety of options if we were to move forward.
I think my initial reaction is, I mean, the fact that what we've been presented is we're at approximately 195, and the only one that's going to fit into is that fourth bullet, right?
Yes, in its entirety. Yes.
So if we go to one of the other three, there's going to have to, I mean, what do you pull? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that we want to spend 3 more hours trying to figure that out.
If I was to say, well, I don't want to put a bond out there, then I would be ignoring a number of people that have come to me and said, look, I think y'all need to do something. I think you need to let the voters decide. So, as elected officials, I think we need to listen to all folks, right? Mm-hmm. Not just the ones that scream the loudest. And Aaron, I do agree with you on the equity piece. And it's more so as our district has grown. We didn't have that issue when we were a lot smaller, because I grew up here. I think I had typing in this classroom right here, right, in 10th grade. So we didn't have that issue, but that's just part of growth. It's just going to happen, right? Because you're going to have new facilities in some areas, and then of course the socioeconomic issues also come into play in different parts of our city and of our district. But to me, it comes back down to the opportunity that we give kids. I think a kid at Southwest Elementary should have the same opportunity as a kid at, Roddy, you mentioned one of our other elementary schools that has done fantastic, right? So I think a kid there at Southwest should have the same opportunity, and there's no reason that kid can't thrive just like the kids in the North. And I think for us, we have a responsibility to both of those kids, to do everything we can for them, to give them an opportunity. And I think this plays a part in it. But at the end of the day, we got to trust the process, right? So we live in a democratic society, and let the folks decide what they want to do.
Let me make a clarification. I'm not saying that I wouldn't support a bond, but as I was saying, there's some of the projects that I think we're asking too much. And I think part of our democracy, a democratic republic. I think what we live in, where we're supposed to, we're here, a lot of the community isn't going to hear this, so we're kind of a buffer. And I think that's what I'm trying to represent, for folks that aren't going to be watching this tonight and who aren't engaged. You know, if you look at I always want to call it the census. Melinda's so good with words, but
Demographer report.
The demography report and things like that, but, or the survey that we did. If you look at where my district is, and I'm trying to represent the whole district, but it's the lowest, it's gonna be the lowest turnout. I think it's, 27%, whereas on the north end, it's gonna be 56%. I'm just throwing that number there, but it's very different. So, yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not like I don't support it all. Maggie, you made a great point earlier that it's a lot of years that we went without having an increase in funds during history when we've never experienced, at least I haven't ever in my lifetime, of that kind of inflation. So are we behind? Yes. But I don't, there's also the burden that we put on parents. And I do, there's that sentiment, sorry, I'm dragging this meeting on, but
we need to hear it.
This is a sentiment that I've heard that's brought me concern, and it's that, hey, we need to do what's right for the kids. Absolutely. But also, by passing a bond like this, all of this is going to be passed on to our kids. My daughter, who will graduate 2 years, could be paying for this for the next 30. And then not only her, but grandchildren, my grandchildren, her children, right? They could be paying for this, and there is an impact on the future, which does impact every student as well, or could if they stay in this area. So, I mean, yeah, that's all I'll say for a minute. I'm trying to hold my tongue, but thank you guys for having patience with me.
Okay.
So what do we do? I mean, do we look at something different, or do we?
Brandon, were you going to make a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, Brandon.
Try to be super direct. I like A. I would like to see us add something back in to figure out that building, whatever needs to happen for, whether that's robotics, or maybe we just come in under budget on other projects and we can fix it there. B, Harper, I think it's gonna be a challenging thing to pass, but I think we should let people speak on it. C, it's fine with me. D, I lean towards the D1 option, just because I think about the functionality of it, and if we're adding, I guess the new pool will probably have a sturdy structure on it, right? It won't be another tent, and so now we're talking about like once a year being able to utilize half the center, and so like that's a big one. That's $8 million delta on being able to be able to use an extra half of the facility one time a year. So I think that could be scaled back just from a practical standpoint, but feel free to disagree on that. But those are my specifics.
I appreciate that.
There we go.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Anyone else? No?
Have y'all, played around with the 4 projects, having them fit into any of those 3?
No, not yet. I just need to get a sense of, is there a range of either increase the tax rate that you're comfortable with, or is it we're doing 0 increase the tax rate? If we would be interested in doing 0 cents, you've got 2 options here. You can do the larger capacity with multiple issuances, or you can do the smaller one. I would not be recommending the $149 million. I think there are too many needs that we've talked about tonight, and I think we would be paring down a significant amount of those needs. And so, not hearing anyone's comfort level with 3 cents.
No. I mean, financially, if you can do with 0 cents, either 149 or 200, you do 200, right? If it's a 0 cent change, you do 200 if you get projects you can justify for that, right?
Yeah, I think as long as they're close, we build a model how we want to build a model.
Yeah.
And if we want to tell people, voters, that we're not going to raise taxes more than half a cent, and they pass everything, well, then we just phase it, right?
Right.
Like, we just honor what we say we're gonna do on the tax rate, and the projects have to phase out the way that they are. And if growth takes off and we can get it all in one shot and not have to raise the tax rate more than we promised people, I think that's just where we're accountable on the back end, if everything gets supported, which would be a.
So Brandon,
great
you like the fourth bullet point?
Yes, I mean, that's kind of where I'm, is see where the props fly. I mean, we should probably have some conversation on propositions fall about what we would be comfortable raising the tax rate, and then that's then direction to the financial advisor and Melissa as far as, okay, then we can only sell 100 million right now, or we can only sell 120. But I say if the community authorizes it, then we just get the authorization and figure it out after.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Well, I appreciate it was a long meeting. Thank y'all very much. I apologize I had to leave in the middle of it. Sometimes family calls and you have to address it, so thank y'all for understanding that. And I think we've gotten what we need, and we'll get to work after this, and I think you already have a potential date held on your calendar. I'll make sure you still have that date.
August 18th?
It has to be before that date. I think
Okay.
we had a holder for the 14th. Okay. Okay. So we've got some work to do behind the scenes, and this has been incredibly helpful. Thank y'all so much. I want to thank the Bond Advisory Committee for their time and coming and working with us, and all those who came to the community meeting and filled out a survey. And so I just want to thank you and thank the team, Christine and Mike, for everything and all the hard work, and Melissa, everybody in this room has worked so hard, all the amazing people behind me. So just appreciate everybody being here and getting us to this point.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing. Thank you to all of your administrative staff, Dr. Golden, and the trustees that were able to make it tonight. What a great conversation, great dialogue. Everybody's opinion matters. So with that said, our workshop is now concluded. There being no further business, we are adjourned at
8:38.
8:38.